Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Good evening. What I'm about to share with you happened over the span of 18 months across 3 different military proving grounds in Arizona. These aren't stories you'll find in official reports. These are testimonies from people who were there, people who saw things that made them question everything they thought they knew about the night sky over our most classified testing facilities. My name is Cole Maddox, and for 6 years, I worked security detail at the Yuma Proving Ground in southwestern Arizona. If you don't know what that is, it's one of the largest military installations in the world, covering over 100 square miles of scorching desert where the Army tests everything from artillery shells to experimental aircraft. The kind of place where you see things blow up on a weekly basis and you don't ask questions. But what I saw on the night of March 14, 2019, wasn't something that exploded. It was something that appeared. I was on the midnight to 8 shift, which meant patrolling the northern perimeter road in a modified Humvee with barely functioning air conditioning. The desert gets cold at night, dropping from 95 degrees during the day to maybe 50 after sunset, and the temperature shock always messed with your head a bit. Made you see things that weren't there, or at least that's what the senior officers always told us during orientation. Around 2:47 a.m., I was about 12 miles from the main gate, near a section we called the Red Zone, because of all the unexploded ordnance warnings posted every 50 feet. The road out there is just packed dirt and rocks, and your headlights are the only source of illumination for miles. No moon that night. Just stars. Millions of them so bright and thick you could almost reach up and touch them. That's when my radio started acting up. A static, pure, crackling static that hurt your ears. I reached down to adjust the frequency, thinking maybe I was too far from the relay tower, when the entire electrical system in my Humvee just died. Engine cut out. Headlights went black. Dashboard lights faded to nothing. Even my watch stopped ticking. The silence that followed was absolute. If you've never been in the desert at night, you can't understand how quiet it gets. No insects, no wind, just this suffocating emptiness that presses against your eardrums. I sat there in the dark, my hand on the ignition trying to process what just happened. Vehicle failures aren't uncommon in extreme conditions, but this was different. This was complete. Then I saw it. About a quarter mile ahead, directly over the road, a column of light appeared. Not a searchlight, not a flare, nothing like that. This was a solid beam of pale, blue-white light extending straight down from the sky to the ground. It didn't illuminate anything around it. The desert floor stayed dark. The Joshua trees stayed in shadow. Just this one perfect cylinder of light, maybe 15 feet in diameter, completely silent. I'm not ashamed to say my first instinct was to lock the doors. Stupid, I know. If something wanted to get me, a locked door wasn't going to stop it. But it's what you do when your brain can't process what your eyes are seeing. You revert to basic safety protocols. The light stayed there for exactly 90 seconds. I know because I counted them in my head, trying to stay calm, trying to convince myself this was some kind of new testing apparatus I hadn't been briefed about. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way to 90. Then it vanished. Didn't fade out, didn't retract back into the sky. It just ceased to exist between one heartbeat and the next. The moment it disappeared, my Humvee roared back to life. Engine turned over like nothing had happened. Headlights blazed on. Radio crackled with someone calling my designation asking for a status update. I grabbed the receiver, my hand shaking so bad I almost dropped it. "This is Unit 7. I'm fine. Vehicle malfunction. All systems back online. Copy that, Unit 7. Recommend you return to base for diagnostic check." I wanted to tell them what I'd seen. I wanted to scream into that radio that something impossible had just happened on their watch. But I didn't. You don't last long in military security by reporting things that sound crazy. So I turned my Humvee around and drove back to base, checking my rearview mirror every 5 seconds to make sure that light wasn't following me. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to check the duty logs from that night. I needed to know if anyone else had seen it, if any of the surveillance systems had picked up anything unusual. What I found was worse than seeing nothing at all. According to the automated monitoring system, there had been a radar blackout at exactly 2:47 a.m., covering a 3-mile radius around my position. Not interference, not equipment failure, just nothing. Like that entire section of the desert had ceased to exist for 90 seconds. Temperature sensors showed a localized drop of 40 degrees. Seismic monitors registered a vibration pattern that the computer flagged as non-standard, but couldn't classify. And my vehicle's GPS tracker? It showed me sitting completely still for those 90 seconds, even though I know I was breathing, moving, counting. Time had passed for me, but according to the machines, I'd been frozen in place. I might have convinced myself I'd hallucinated the whole thing if I hadn't met Sienna Torres 2 weeks later. Sienna worked in the Radar Operations Center at the Goldwater Range, about 60 miles northeast of Yuma. We met at a multi-facility briefing in Phoenix about perimeter security updates, the kind of boring administrative meeting where everyone zones out and watches the clock. During the break, I was getting coffee when I overheard her talking to another technician about anomalous returns and vertical signal drops. I shouldn't have interrupted. It wasn't professional, but I couldn't help myself. "Excuse me, did you say vertical signal drops?" She looked at me, sizing me up with the kind of careful assessment you develop when you work in classified environments. Dark eyes, sharp features, someone who didn't miss details. "Who's asking?" "Cole Maddox. I'm with Yuma Proving Ground Security. I might have experienced something related to what you're talking about." Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Or relief at finding someone who might actually believe her. "Conference room B is empty," she said quietly. "Meet me there in 5 minutes." When we sat down across from each other in that sterile white room with its flickering fluorescent lights, she pulled out a tablet and opened up a series of radar images. What I saw made my stomach drop. "This is from March 14th, she said, pulling up a time-stamped scan. 2:47 a.m. Notice anything unusual? The radar image showed the typical clutter you'd expect over the desert. Ground returns, some weather scatter in the upper atmosphere, a few aircraft transponders marking friendly military flights. Then, at exactly 2:47:03, a hole appeared in the display. A perfect circle of nothing, like someone had taken an eraser to reality itself. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Radar doesn't just stop working in perfect geometric shapes. It gets better," Sienna said, swiping to the next image. "Watch what happens when the blank spot appears." She played a time-lapse sequence, and I watched as the void moved across the desert in a perfectly straight line, heading northeast toward the Goldwater Range. It traveled about 40 miles in 6 minutes, which meant it was moving at roughly 400 miles per hour. Fast, but not impossibly so. Military jets moved faster. What made it impossible was that nothing else on the radar changed. The wind patterns stayed consistent. The weather scatter didn't shift. Other aircraft continued their normal flight paths, completely unaware that a hole in observable reality was passing beneath them. I've been tracking these for 4 months, Sienna said, pulling up more images. They appear randomly, always at night, always in restricted military airspace. Sometimes they're stationary for hours. Sometimes they move. And every single time one appears, we lose all radar coverage in that exact location. It's like whatever this is, it's not just avoiding detection. It's actively negating our ability to detect anything in its vicinity. Have you reported this? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I reported it. Filed 3 separate incident reports with detailed analysis and recommendations for investigation. You know what response I got? Atmospheric anomalies are common in desert environments. Continue monitoring. She closed the tablet with more force than necessary. They don't want to know, Cole. Or maybe they already know and don't want us asking questions. I told her about the light column then, about my vehicle dying, the 90 seconds of absolute silence, the way time seemed to disconnect from reality. As I talked, I watched her face, looking for signs of disbelief or mockery. I found neither. She just listened, nodding occasionally like I was confirming something she'd already suspected. You said the light was blue-white? She asked when I finished. Not red, not orange? Yeah, why? She opened the tablet again, pulling up a different file. Because there's a category of sightings from test site personnel that never makes it into official reports. Maintenance crews, security patrols, even some of the scientists. They all describe the same thing. Vertical light columns, usually blue or white, that appear without warning and disappear just as fast. Most people convince themselves they saw experimental aircraft or advanced weapon testing. Some of them request transfers. A few just quit. How many sightings are we talking about? In the past 2 years? At least 40 documented in unofficial logs, probably dozens more that were never reported. They cluster around 3 locations: Yuma Proving Ground, where you work, Goldwater Range, where I work, and the Sonoran Desert Test Site near Gila Bend. She pulled up a map showing all 3 facilities marked in red, with small blue dots scattered across them representing reported sightings. The pattern was unmistakable. Whatever these lights were, they weren't random. They were focused on military testing facilities. There's something else, Sienna said, her voice dropping even lower. 3 weeks ago, a Marine transport helicopter reported engine failure while flying over Goldwater at night. They managed to auto-rotate down safely, but when the mechanics inspected the aircraft, they found something strange. All the magnetic signatures in the navigation equipment had been reversed. North reading as south, east as west. It took them 4 days to recalibrate everything. Where did this happen? About 2 miles from one of those radar voids. The pilot reported seeing a flash of light just before the engines cut out, but he couldn't describe it clearly, said it was like trying to remember a dream. We sat there in silence for a moment, both of us understanding what we weren't saying out loud. These weren't atmospheric anomalies. These weren't secret weapons tests gone wrong. This was something else, something that operated outside the normal rules of physics and electronics, and it was showing up with increasing frequency over some of the most sensitive military real estate in the United States. What do we do? I finally asked. Sienna looked at me with those sharp, analytical eyes. We document everything. Every sighting, every radar void, every equipment failure. We build a case so detailed and so consistent that they can't ignore it or explain it away. And we find others like us, people who've seen these things and are willing to talk about them. That could end our careers. Probably, she admitted. But wouldn't you rather know the truth than spend the rest of your life wondering if you're losing your mind? She had a point. The light column I'd seen had been eating at me for weeks, making me question my own perception and sanity. If there were others, if there was a pattern, then at least I'd know I wasn't hallucinating. At least I'd have confirmation that reality was stranger than we'd been told. "I'm in," I said. "What's the first step?" "You tell me everything about that night in March. Every detail, no matter how small. Timestamps, weather conditions, exactly what your instruments showed. Then we start cross-referencing with other incidents. I've got access to a lot of historical radar data that nobody's bothered to analyze properly. If these voids have been happening for a while, they'll show up in the archives." We spent the next 2 hours going over my experience, with Sienna taking meticulous notes and asking questions I hadn't thought to consider. What was the ambient temperature? Had I noticed any unusual smells? Were there any wildlife sounds before or after the event? Every seemingly irrelevant detail got cataloged and time-stamped. By the time we finished, I felt drained, but oddly relieved. It wasn't just my problem anymore. Someone else knew. Someone else believed me. And more importantly, someone else had the technical expertise to maybe figure out what the hell was going on. "I'll start pulling the radar archives tonight," Sienna said as we prepared to leave. "Give me your secure email. Once I find something concrete, I'll send you encrypted files. Don't access them from any government network." You really think they're monitoring us? I think that if these phenomena are as significant as they appear, someone in the chain of command knows about them. And if they haven't told us, there's a reason for that silence. Whether it's to protect classified projects or to avoid panic, I don't know. But I'd rather be paranoid and safe than trusting and sorry. She was right, of course. In the world of military security, information control was everything. If something was happening that challenged our understanding of physics or technology, the last thing they'd want was frontline personnel spreading rumors or demanding explanations. As I drove back to Yuma that evening, watching the sun set over the desert in shades of orange and purple, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed some invisible threshold. I'd gone from a security guard who saw something weird to someone actively investigating phenomena that weren't supposed to exist. It felt dangerous and exciting in equal measure. 3 days later, Sienna sent me the first batch of files. What I saw in those radar archives changed everything. The voids weren't new. They'd been appearing for at least 5 years, maybe longer, but nobody had bothered to connect the dots because they happened at different facilities, different times, under different conditions. Each incident had been dismissed as equipment malfunction or atmospheric interference. But when you lined them all up chronologically and geographically, a pattern emerged. The voids were increasing in frequency. What had been 2 or 3 incidents per year in 2014 had grown to nearly 40 in 2019. They were also getting more sophisticated, if that was even the right word. Early voids were smaller, maybe half a mile in diameter, and they disappeared quickly. Recent ones could span 3 miles and last for several minutes. More disturbing was their movement patterns. The early voids were stationary, appearing in one location and vanishing without traveling. But starting in late 2017, they began to move, following straight-line paths that connected different test facilities. It was almost like they were mapping the area, learning the geography of our most classified installations. Sienna had included notes with the files, observations that made my skin crawl. Notice the correlation between void appearances and major weapons tests. Every time there's a scheduled ballistic missile evaluation or new aircraft trial, void frequency increases by 40% in the surrounding area. Whatever these are, they seem drawn to our most advanced technology demonstrations. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by printed radar images and scattered notes, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The logical part of my brain wanted to find a conventional explanation. Weather balloons with reflective surfaces, stealth drones being tested without proper clearance. Some kind of sophisticated electronic warfare exercise that created false radar shadows. But none of those explanations fit the evidence. Weather balloons don't move in perfectly straight lines at 400 miles per hour. Drones don't cause complete electronic failure in ground vehicles. Electronic warfare doesn't create localized temperature drops of 40 degrees, which left me with the uncomfortable possibility that we were dealing with something beyond our current understanding of technology. Something that could move through restricted airspace without generating radar returns, that could disable electronics at a distance, that could appear and disappear in ways that violated our basic understanding of physics. My phone buzzed. Encrypted message from Sienna. Found 3 security personnel willing to talk. Meeting tomorrow night at 8. Location TBD. Bring your story. I stared at that message for a long time. This was the point where I could still back out. Tell Sienna I'd changed my mind. Go back to my normal routine of patrolling desert roads and pretending everything made sense. But I'd already seen the light column. I'd already felt my Humvee die beneath me for 90 impossible seconds. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, couldn't unknow what I now knew. Reality had a crack in it, and I'd glimpsed something through that crack that wasn't supposed to be visible. The only question now was whether I had the courage to keep looking. I typed back, "I'll be there." The meeting took place in a storage unit facility on the outskirts of Gila Bend, 20 miles from the nearest military installation. Sienna had chosen the location carefully. No security cameras, no digital locks that could be tracked, just old-fashioned padlocks and concrete walls. The kind of place where conversations stayed private. When I arrived at 7:55 p.m., Sienna was already there, along with 3 others I didn't recognize. The storage unit was maybe 10 by 15 feet, lit by a single battery-powered lantern that cast harsh shadows across everyone's faces. We looked like conspiracy theorists preparing for some kind of apocalypse, which I suppose wasn't entirely wrong. "Cole Maddox, meet your fellow witnesses," Sienna said, gesturing to the others. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Sanders, pilot with the 214th, Sarah Kelly, maintenance crew chief at Goldwater, and David Torres, my brother, who works as a civilian contractor doing environmental monitoring." I shook hands with each of them, noting the cautious way they assessed me, the same way I was assessing them. Trust wasn't easy to come by when you were talking about things that officially didn't exist. Lieutenant Sanders spoke first. He was in his late 30s, fit and angular, with the kind of weathered face you got from spending too much time in a helicopter cockpit. "I appreciate Sienna organizing this, but I want to be clear about something up front. I'm here because I saw something I can't explain, and it's driving me crazy. But I'm not looking to blow the whistle or start some kind of movement. I just want to understand what happened to me." "Same," Sarah Kelly said. She was younger, maybe mid-20s, with grease-stained hands that marked her as someone who actually worked with machinery rather than just managing it. "I don't want to lose my security clearance over this. I like my job. But what I saw 3 months ago doesn't make any goddamn sense, and pretending it was normal isn't working anymore." David Torres nodded agreement. He had Sienna's sharp features and intelligent eyes, but where she radiated controlled intensity, he seemed more relaxed, more comfortable with uncertainty. "Environmental monitoring means I spend a lot of time in the desert at odd hours, usually alone. You see strange things out there sometimes. Most of them have perfectly reasonable explanations once you understand the environment. But what I witnessed last September, that wasn't reasonable. That wasn't natural." Sienna pulled out a whiteboard she'd propped against the wall and uncapped a marker. "Okay, ground rules. Everything said in this room stays in this room. No recordings, no written notes that leave this location. We share our experiences, look for patterns, and decide together what to do with what we learn. Everyone agreed?" We all nodded. Good. Cole, you want to start? Give everyone the overview of your experience. I walked them through the night of March 14th, watching their faces as I described the light column, the complete system failure, the 90 seconds of impossible silence. Sarah Kelly's eyes widened when I mentioned the electrical systems dying. Lieutenant Sanders leaned forward when I described the way the light appeared and disappeared without transition. The timeline matches, Sanders said when I finished. I had a similar experience on March 14th, about 40 minutes after your incident. I was flying a routine training pattern over Goldwater when all my instruments went dark. Complete avionics failure, like someone had flipped a switch. I had maybe 10 seconds of pure panic before everything came back online. When I landed, the maintenance crew couldn't find anything wrong with the helicopter. Every system tested normal. Did you see any light? Sienna asked, already writing on the whiteboard. No light, but I felt something. It's hard to describe. Like the air pressure suddenly changed, but inside my head instead of in the cabin. Made my ears pop, made my teeth ache. Then it was gone, and the instruments came back. Sarah Kelly was nodding. Okay, that's consistent with what I found during inspections. We've had 6 helicopters come in over the past 4 months reporting sudden avionics failures during night operations. All of them happened over the Goldwater or Yuma ranges. All of them showed the same pattern. Everything goes dark for 10 to 90 seconds, then comes back like nothing happened. The weird part is what we found when we opened up the instrument panels. She paused, looking around like she was still deciding whether to say what came next. Go on, Sienna encouraged. The magnetic signatures were reversed. Every compass, every heading indicator, every piece of equipment that relied on Earth's magnetic field had been flipped. It's like for those few seconds, magnetic north became south, east became west. We've never seen anything that could do that naturally. Even a massive solar flare wouldn't cause such a localized, temporary reversal. Environmental monitoring picked up similar anomalies. David Torres added. My job is to track electromagnetic field variations across the test sites, looking for patterns that might indicate underground water sources or mineral deposits. Starting about 6 months ago, we started seeing these spikes, sudden, intense bursts of electromagnetic activity that lasted less than 2 minutes, then disappeared completely. They didn't match any known pattern. Not lightning, not equipment interference, not geological activity. Just these impossible pulses of energy that appeared and vanished without a source. Sienna wrote on the whiteboard, common elements, electronic failure, magnetic reversal, EM pulses, time distortion, no sound, blue-white light. What about visual confirmation? She asked, turning back to us. Besides Cole's light column, has anyone else actually seen something? David raised his hand slowly. Last September, I was doing a late-night survey about 15 miles into the Sonoran test site. I was using ground-penetrating radar to map subsurface features, completely routine work. Around 11 p.m., my equipment started picking up this weird return signal. It looked like there was something massive about 200 feet below the surface. Something that the GPR was interpreting as metal, or maybe crystal. Very dense, very regular geometric pattern. He pulled out his phone, swiping through photos until he found what he was looking for. I took a screenshot of the display before I lost signal. Look at this. The image showed a GPR readout with the typical noise and scatter you'd expect from rock and sand, but right in the center was a perfect circle of high-density returns. It looked almost like a cross-section of a sphere, except it was showing up on underground scanning equipment. I was about to call it in when the entire system crashed, David continued. Complete power failure, which shouldn't be possible because the GPR has triple redundant batteries. I was sitting there in the dark, trying to figure out what happened. when I noticed the stars were wrong. Wrong how? I asked. Wrong positions. The constellations were in places they shouldn't have been, like someone had rotated the sky 30 degrees. I stood there staring up, completely disoriented, and then I saw it. A section of stars just disappeared. A circular patch of the night sky went black, like something had blocked out the light. It was maybe 50 feet in diameter, hovering maybe 300 feet up, completely silent. Did it move? Sienna asked, writing frantically. Yeah, it drifted north very slowly, maybe walking speed. I could track it by watching which stars disappeared as it passed in front of them. It traveled about a quarter mile, then the stars came back. My equipment powered on, and everything was normal again. Except when I checked my watch, 15 minutes had passed. I'd only been standing there for what felt like 2 or 3 minutes, but somehow I'd lost 15 minutes of time. The room went quiet. Missing time was the detail that pushed everything into deeply uncomfortable territory. Equipment failures could be explained. Strange lights could be written off as optical illusions. But time distortion? That suggested something that operated outside the normal rules of cause and effect. I had missing time too, I admitted. According to my GPS tracker, I sat motionless for 90 seconds, but I was conscious the whole time. I counted those seconds in my head. From my perspective, time moved normally, but the machines said otherwise. Lieutenant Sanders looked pale. After my avionics came back, I checked my flight recorder. It showed a 3-minute gap in the data log, but I know I was only blind for maybe 30 seconds. I remember every second of trying to keep the helicopter level without instruments. It couldn't have been 3 minutes. Sienna added, time distortion, subjective versus recorded, to the whiteboard, then stepped back to look at what we had. Okay, let's think about this logically. We have multiple independent witnesses reporting similar phenomena across 3 different military facilities. We have equipment failures that our best technicians can't explain. We have radar voids that shouldn't be possible. We have missing time. What does that suggest? That something is operating in our airspace that we can't detect through normal means, Sarah Kelly said. Something that can manipulate electromagnetic fields, disable electronics, and somehow affect how time is recorded or experienced. Which sounds impossible, Lieutenant Sanders added. But all the evidence points to it being real. What if it's our own technology? I suggested. Black budget projects, experimental stealth systems. The military has been working on electromagnetic pulse weapons for years. Maybe what we're seeing is side effects from those tests. David shook his head. EMP weapons create widespread interference. They don't produce localized magnetic reversals or time distortion, and they definitely don't cause radar voids that move in straight lines across hundreds of miles. Whatever this is, it's more sophisticated than any known directed energy system. So, what's the alternative? Sanders demanded. We're all going to sit here and say it's aliens? That's career suicide even if we're right. I'm not saying anything definitive, Sienna interjected. I'm saying we need more data. We need to document every incident, compile every piece of evidence, look for patterns that might tell us what we're dealing with. Maybe it is some kind of classified military project. Maybe it's something else. But right now, we're operating on scattered observations and incomplete information. She was right, of course. Wild speculation wouldn't get us anywhere. What we needed was systematic documentation, the kind of rigorous evidence collection that could withstand scrutiny. I've been pulling historical radar data going back 10 years, Sienna continued. The voids started appearing in early 2014, very small and infrequent. Over the years, they've grown larger and more common. But here's what's really interesting. They seem to cluster around specific dates. Spring equinox, summer solstice, fall equinox, winter solstice, the frequency doubles during those periods. Seasonal patterns? Sarah asked. What would cause that? Atmospheric conditions change seasonally, David offered. Temperature inversions, air density variations. If we're dealing with some kind of plasma phenomenon or electromagnetic disturbance, those factors could influence when and how it manifests. Or, Sanders said quietly, if it's intelligent, it operates on some kind of schedule we don't understand. The word intelligent hung in the air like smoke. None of us wanted to say it directly, but we were all thinking it. Random atmospheric phenomena didn't reverse magnetic fields. Natural plasma formations didn't disable vehicles and helicopters with surgical precision. Equipment malfunctions didn't create geometric radar voids that traveled in perfectly straight lines. Whatever we were dealing with showed signs of deliberate action, purposeful movement, sophisticated technology. Whether that intelligence was human or something else was the question that terrified us. I want to propose something, Sienna said. We set up our own monitoring network. Nothing official, nothing that goes through channels. David has access to portable EM field detectors. Sarah can source some spare avionics that we can use as sensors. Cole and Sanders can provide ground and air observations. We create a web of monitoring stations across all 3 facilities and see if we can capture one of these events in real time with multiple data streams. That's a lot of equipment to move around without authorization, Sarah pointed out. People will notice. Not if we're smart about it. David already has clearance to be all over the test sites for environmental work. I can pull radar data in real time from my station. We just need a few strategic sensor placements and quick response capabilities when something starts happening. Communication is going to be a problem, Sanders said. We can't use military frequencies to coordinate this. They're all monitored. Encrypted civilian channels, David suggested. I use them for field work all the time. As long as we're not discussing anything classified, nobody cares what environmental contractors talk about on commercial bands. We spent the next hour working out logistics. David would place EM sensors at 10 strategic locations across the test sites, disguised as standard environmental monitoring equipment. Sarah would borrow some backup navigation instruments from the maintenance depot that we could use to detect magnetic field distortions. Sienna would monitor radar feeds and alert the rest of us when a void started forming. Sanders and I would serve as rapid response observers, ready to drive or fly to any location where anomalous activity was detected. It was risky. If we got caught diverting military resources for unauthorized investigations, we'd all lose our clearances at minimum, possibly face criminal charges for misappropriating government property. But the alternative was continuing to pretend we hadn't seen what we'd seen, continuing to ignore phenomena that could represent either groundbreaking technology or a serious security threat. As the meeting broke up around midnight, Sienna pulled me aside. You okay with this? It's going to require a lot of off-duty time, and there's no guarantee we'll find anything conclusive. I'm okay with it, I said. That light column I saw changed something for me. I can't just clock in and clock out anymore pretending everything's normal. I need to know what's really happening out there. She nodded understanding. Just be careful. If this is a classified project, the people running it won't appreciate us snooping around. And if it's something else... She trailed off, leaving that thought unfinished. If it's something else, then we're the only ones trying to document it properly, I finished for her. That has to count for something. Over the next 2 weeks, our makeshift monitoring network came together. David placed his EM sensors across the test ranges, logging data continuously and uploading it to an encrypted server every 6 hours. Sarah installed the spare navigation instruments at her barracks and at my apartment, both locations offering good views of the night sky with minimal light pollution. Sienna created a notification system that would text all of us the moment a radar void started forming, giving us real-time updates on its location and trajectory. Lieutenant Sanders was our airborne asset, ready to launch his helicopter with minimal notice to get aerial observations of any phenomena. It wasn't officially sanctioned, but training flights happened frequently enough that one more wouldn't raise suspicions as long as he stayed within authorized airspace. On April 4th, 2019, at 11:37 p.m., we got our first alert. My phone buzzed with Sienna's message. Void forming. Goldwater North Sector. Expanding from point source. Radius 0.8 miles and growing. No aircraft in area. I was off duty, but happened to be at my apartment, which was only 15 miles from the Goldwater North boundary. I grabbed my gear, spare batteries, night vision binoculars, a handheld radio set to our agreed frequency, and jumped into my truck. David's voice crackled over the radio as I drove. EM spike confirmed, reading 400% above baseline and climbing. Signature doesn't match any known natural or artificial source. Instruments showing magnetic deviation, Sarah reported. Compass bearing shifting 5 degrees per minute. Sanders's helicopter was already in the air. I'm 8 minutes out from the coordinates. Sienna, talk to me. What's the void doing? Holding position. Sienna's voice came through, professional and calm despite what we were all thinking. Diameter stable at 1.2 miles. No movement detected. All radar returns within the void are completely absent. It's like there's a hole in the world. I pushed my truck faster, racing down the empty highway toward the north sector. The desert at night was pitch black except for my headlights, and I had to resist the urge to imagine that column of light appearing over the road ahead of me like it had in March. Cole, what's your ETA? Sienna asked. 5 minutes. I'm coming in from the southeast access road. Copy. When you get there, I need you to take readings with the backup compass and report any visual anomalies. Sanders, you're getting close. Tell me what you see. There was a pause, filled with the sound of helicopter rotors. Then Sanders' voice strained. I see it. Jesus Christ, I see it. Describe it, Sienna demanded. It's a darkness, like someone cut a circle out of the night sky. No stars visible in that section. No ground features, just empty space where reality should be. It's big, much bigger than it looked on radar, and it's absolutely silent. I pulled off the highway onto the access road, bouncing over rough terrain as I approached the coordinates Sienna had given. My truck's headlights swept across scrub brush and rock formations, and then I saw it. Sanders was right. It was a darkness. A perfect, circular void suspended about 200 feet above the desert floor. The stars around it were crisp and clear, but within that circle, there was nothing. Not black, like the night sky, but absent, like someone had deleted that section of reality. I stopped the truck and grabbed my equipment, stepping out into the cold desert air. The silence was profound. No wind, no insects, no distant sounds of traffic. Just absolute quiet. The same kind of suffocating emptiness I'd experienced during my March encounter. Visual confirmation, I reported into the radio. Circular void approximately 1.5 miles in diameter, elevation roughly 200 feet. No sound, no visible light. Compass showing erratic behavior, needle rotating slowly counterclockwise. EM readings off the scale. David's voice cracked with excitement and fear. This is producing more electromagnetic energy than a lightning strike, but it's not radiating outward. It's like the energy is being contained somehow, focused inward. I'm going in for a closer look, Sanders announced. Negative. Sienna's response was sharp. We don't know what that thing would do to your avionics. Maintain safe distance. I need to see it from different angles. If I stay at the periphery, the radio erupted with static. Through the noise, I heard Sanders' voice, distorted and distant. Losing power, instruments failing, can't. Then silence. Sanders, Lieutenant Sanders, respond. Sienna's voice cracked through the static, desperate and commanding. Nothing but white noise for 10 eternal seconds. Then faintly, I'm here. I'm okay. Systems are back. What the hell was that? The relief that washed through me was almost physical. I realized I'd been holding my breath, staring up at that impossible void with my hand frozen on the radio transmit button. Report your status, Sienna said, her voice steady again, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. All systems operational now. But for about 20 seconds, everything went dark. Instruments, lights, engine. I was in a dead aircraft at 800 feet. I've never been so scared in my life. The helicopter just glided. No power, no control, just physics keeping me in the air. Then everything snapped back on like nothing happened. Did you penetrate the perimeter of the void? I asked, watching the darkness above with new understanding. It wasn't just a visual phenomenon. It was a sphere of some kind of effect that disrupted everything electronic that came near it. I got within maybe 200 yards. The moment I crossed some invisible threshold, my aircraft died. When I fell back below that line, power returned. It's like there's a barrier, a field of some kind that our instruments can't penetrate. EM readings confirm that, David reported. The field has a defined edge, sharp transition from normal to extreme values, and it's perfectly spherical based on how the magnetic distortions are propagating. Whatever technology is creating this, it has extraordinary precision. I raised my night vision binoculars and scanned the periphery of the void, looking for any detail my naked eye might have missed. Through the green-tinted optics, the void appeared even more disturbing, a sphere of absolute blackness that seemed to absorb light rather than simply being dark. Then I saw something at the base of the sphere where it intersected the ground. A faint glow, blue-white in color, creating a ring maybe 20 feet wide. There's light at the ground interface, I reported. Same color as the column I saw in March. It's not bright, more like bioluminescence, like the ground is glowing where the sphere touches it. Can you get closer? Sienna asked. We need photos, measurements, anything concrete. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stay away, to maintain a safe distance from something that could kill helicopter engines and reverse magnetic fields. But we'd come this far, risked this much. Turning back now because of fear wouldn't get us answers. I'm moving in, I said, grabbing my equipment bag and starting forward on foot. The desert floor was uneven, forcing me to watch my step in the darkness while still keeping my eyes on the void above. As I got closer, I noticed the temperature dropping. It was already cold by desert standards, maybe 45 degrees, but as I approached within 100 yards of the glow, the temperature plummeted. My breath became visible. Frost formed on my jacket. The ground crunched under my boots with a texture that shouldn't exist in Arizona desert, ice crystals forming on sand and rock. Temperatures dropping rapidly, I reported. I'm seeing frost formation. This thing is pulling heat out of the environment somehow. Be careful, Sarah's voice came through. If it's affecting temperature that dramatically, it's manipulating energy at a fundamental level. We have no idea what else it might be doing. 50 yards away now. The blue glow was brighter, creating enough illumination that I could see details of the desert floor. The light wasn't reflecting off surfaces like normal light would. It seemed to emanate from within the ground itself, from the sand and rocks like they'd been excited into some kind of fluorescence. I took out my phone, knowing it was probably futile, but wanting to document this anyway. The moment I raised it to take a photo, the screen went dark, dead battery, even though it had been at 87% charge seconds ago. "Lost my phone," I reported. "It just died. Still have the radio, though." "The field must extend further than we thought," David said. "It's not a sharp barrier, it's a gradient. The closer you get, the stronger the effect." I pulled out my backup compass, watching the needle spin uselessly. No orientation, no magnetic north, just confused rotation as the device tried to reconcile impossible readings. I set it on the ground next to my phone, creating a small pile of failed technology, and continued forward. At 30 yards, I could see into the glow. The ground wasn't just fluorescing, it was changing. The sand had crystallized into geometric patterns, perfect hexagons interlocking across the surface like bizarre snowflakes. Rock formations showed similar structures, their rough surfaces suddenly displaying crystalline facets that caught and refracted the blue light. "The ground is transforming," I said into the radio. "Molecular reorganization or something. Sand turning into crystal structures. I've never seen anything like this." "Cole, I really think you should back off," Sienna cautioned. "We're in unknown territory here. That transformation could extend to biological matter." She had a point. If this field could reorganize sand into crystals, what would it do to human tissue? I imagined my cells suddenly trying to arrange themselves into geometric patterns and felt my stomach twist. But I was so close. 20 yards from the edge of the glow, 15 yards from answers we'd been seeking for months. I took another step forward, then another. That's when I heard the sound. It wasn't coming from the void. It was coming from behind me, from the direction of my truck. A deep, resonant hum that I felt in my chest cavity more than heard with my ears. Like someone had struck an enormous tuning fork tuned to a frequency that made your organs vibrate. I spun around and saw my truck lifting off the ground. Not quickly, not dramatically, just slowly rising into the air like it weighed nothing. The wheels cleared the desert floor by a foot, then 2 feet, then 3. The entire vehicle was ascending in complete silence except for that deep hum, rotating slowly clockwise as it rose. "My truck is flying," I said into the radio, my voice admirably steady considering my brain was trying to process something impossible. "It's being lifted by some kind of force, no visible means of propulsion." "Get away from there now," Sanders shouted. "Whatever that thing is, it's expanding its effect radius. Move!" I ran. Not directly away from the void, but at an angle, trying to put distance between myself and both the glowing sphere and my inexplicably airborne truck. The desert floor was treacherous in the darkness, and I stumbled twice, catching myself before falling completely. Behind me, the hum intensified. I risked a glance back and saw my truck accelerating upward, spinning faster now, being pulled toward the void like metal to a magnet. At about 50 feet of altitude, it just stopped. Hung there in midair, still rotating, completely defying every law of physics I'd been taught. Then it dropped. Not fell. Dropped like someone had cut a string. 1 second floating, the next second plummeting straight down. It hit the desert floor with a tremendous crash, the sound of metal crumpling and glass shattering echoing across the emptiness. The void above pulsed. The blue light brightened for just a moment, like a heartbeat, and then everything changed. The sphere began to collapse. Not shrinking gradually, but collapsing in on itself in segments like reality was being folded origami style. Sections of the darkness disappeared in geometric patterns, revealing the stars behind them in fractured glimpses. The process took maybe 5 seconds, reality being reassembled piece by piece, until the void was completely gone and the night sky looked normal again. The sudden return of normalcy was jarring. Stars where there had been emptiness. Ambient sound where there had been silence. The gentle desert wind that I hadn't realized had stopped. I stood there in the darkness, my heart pounding, staring at the space where the void had been. The ground where the blue glow had been was still crystallized, still showing those impossible geometric patterns, but it was fading quickly. As I watched, the crystals lost their structure, collapsing back into regular sand like a time-lapse video running in reverse. "Cole, are you okay?" Sienna's voice pulled me back to reality. Yeah, I'm okay. The void is gone. It just collapsed and disappeared." We saw it on radar. The void vanished at 11:58 p.m., exactly 21 minutes after it formed. "Did you get any close-up photos before your phone died?" "No, but the crystallized sand formations are still here, or they were. They're degrading now, returning to normal sand. I should collect samples while I still can." I pulled sample bags from my gear and scooped up some of the crystallized sand, working quickly before all evidence of transformation disappeared. The crystals felt cold, much colder than the ambient temperature, and they made a strange chiming sound when they clinked together in the bag. "Cole, I'm landing nearby," Sanders said. "You need transport out of there, and I want to see that crash site. Your truck might have physical evidence." 10 minutes later, Sanders' helicopter touched down 50 yards from my position, rotor wash kicking up dust and disturbed sand. I jogged over with my equipment and samples, and together we approached what was left of my truck. The vehicle was totaled. The frame had bent in ways that shouldn't be possible. Metal twisted like soft clay. All the windows were blown out. The engine block had partially separated from its mountings. But what was most disturbing was the pattern of damage. It wasn't random impact damage from a fall. The metal showed signs of intense localized heating in specific places, creating burn patterns that formed concentric circles across the hood, roof, and doors. "It's like something scanned your truck while it was elevated," Sanders said, examining the patterns with his flashlight. "Focused energy beams, maybe some kind of directed radiation. These burn marks are too precise to be accidental." I pulled out my radio. "Sienna, we need a recovery team out here. My truck is evidence now. These damage patterns aren't from a simple fall." "I can't authorize an official recovery without explaining why your personal vehicle was in a restricted area off-duty," she pointed out. "But I might be able to get David out there with his environmental monitoring crew. They could document it as an abandoned vehicle and haul it to the impound yard before anyone asks too many questions." Over the next 3 hours, we worked to document everything. David arrived with his crew and measurement equipment, cataloging the crash site, the residual crystallization patterns, and the electromagnetic readings, which were still slightly elevated. Sarah analyzed the samples I'd collected, noting that the sand crystals showed molecular structures that shouldn't be possible at atmospheric pressure and temperature. By dawn, we had retreated to our storage unit headquarters, exhausted but energized by what we'd witnessed and documented. The evidence was undeniable now. This wasn't atmospheric phenomena or equipment malfunction. This was technology, sophisticated and deliberate, operating in our airspace without authorization or detection. "We need to decide what to do with this," Sienna said, spreading out photos and data readouts across the storage unit floor. "We've documented an incident that involved electronic interference, gravity manipulation, matter transformation, and what appears to be some kind of scanning operation. This is beyond our pay grade. This needs to go up the chain of command." "And say what exactly?" Sanders challenged. "That we conducted unauthorized surveillance using government resources to investigate phenomena we weren't tasked to investigate? That we coordinated off-the-books monitoring networks across multiple facilities? We'll be court-martialed before anyone looks at our evidence." "He's right," Sarah said quietly. "The moment we report this through official channels, we lose control of the narrative. They'll classify everything, separate us, probably reassign us to different bases. We'll never know what they conclude or what they do with our findings. But we have evidence that something is operating in restricted military airspace, I argued. Something with capabilities that far exceed our current technology. If it's foreign adversaries testing some kind of advanced drone or stealth system, that's a massive security threat. We can't just sit on this. What if it's not foreign adversaries? David asked. What if it's exactly what it looks like? Non-human technology conducting surveillance of our military installations. Are we prepared for that conclusion? The question hung in the air. We'd all been dancing around it for months, finding reasons to avoid the obvious implication. But after what we'd witnessed tonight, the careful explanations and conventional possibilities seemed increasingly absurd. These weren't drones. Drones didn't create spherical voids in radar coverage. Drones didn't reorganize sand into impossible crystal structures. Drones didn't levitate multi-ton vehicles and then drop them with burn patterns that suggested active scanning. I think we need more data before we make any decisions, Sienna finally said. One incident isn't enough, no matter how dramatic. We need to establish a pattern, document multiple occurrences, build a case that's so comprehensive it can't be ignored or explained away. Can we all commit to continuing this for at least another 2 months? We looked at each other, weighing the risks against the need to know. My truck was destroyed. Sanders had nearly died when his helicopter lost power. We were all operating on the edge of regulations, one discovery away from losing our careers. But we'd also seen something extraordinary, something that suggested the universe was stranger and more complex than we'd been told. How could any of us walk away from that? I'm in, I said. Me too, Sarah added. Sanders nodded. 2 more months. But if we get another incident like tonight, we report it immediately. I'm not risking lives to satisfy curiosity. Agreed, Sienna said. David? Her brother had been quiet, studying the data readouts with intense concentration. I'll stay on, he said slowly. But I think we need to expand our search. If these voids are appearing at Yuma, Goldwater, and the Sonoran test site, they're probably appearing at other locations too. Other testing facilities, other military installations. We should be looking at historical data from White Sands, Nellis, China Lake, any place where classified technology gets tested. That's a lot of data to analyze, Sienna said. And most of it isn't easily accessible. I have some contacts for my contractor work. Environmental monitoring companies work at all those facilities. I can make inquiries without raising suspicions, see if anyone else has noticed anomalies. Over the following weeks, our investigation expanded. David reached out to his network of contractors and technicians, carefully probing for stories of equipment failures and strange sightings. What he found was disturbing. Similar incidents had been reported at every major military testing facility in the southwestern United States, going back at least a decade. At White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, maintenance crews reported vehicles losing power during night patrols, sometimes accompanied by mysterious lights. At Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, pilots had documented sudden avionics failures during night training exercises. At Edwards Air Force Base in California, ground crews had found sand crystallization patterns near runway 22 after a night when multiple personnel reported seeing unusual aerial phenomena. The pattern was undeniable. Something was systematically surveying our most classified military installations, and it had been doing so for years without official acknowledgement. Sienna compiled everything into a detailed report complete with radar data, photographs, witness testimonies, and analysis of the physical evidence. It was 140 pages of carefully documented phenomena that defied conventional explanation. "What now?" she asked. at our meeting in early June. We have the evidence. Do we report it? To who? Sanders asked. Our immediate commanders will just kick it upstairs. It'll disappear into classified channels, and we'll never hear about it again. What if we leak it? Sarah suggested. Give it to journalists, researchers, people outside the military structure who can publicize it without going through official channels. That's espionage, I said flatly. We'd all go to prison. This is classified information collected on classified facilities. Leaking it isn't whistleblowing, it's a federal crime. We sat in frustrated silence. We had proof of something extraordinary, but no safe way to share it with anyone who could do something meaningful with the information. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you've been investigating. We need to talk. Come alone to coordinates 32.8719 DGN 113.9234 DGDU in Boyu tomorrow at 2200 hours. Tell no one. I showed the message to the others. The coordinates were deep in the Yuma Proving Ground, in a section marked as off-limits even to security personnel due to unexploded ordnance. It's a trap, Sanders said immediately. Someone knows what we've been doing and they're trying to isolate you. Or it's someone who wants to help, David countered. Someone inside the system who knows more than we do and wants to make contact without going through official channels. Either way, Cole can't go alone, Sienna said. We all go, or none of us go. I looked at the coordinates again, thinking about that light column I'd seen in March, about my truck being lifted into the air and scanned, about the impossible voids in radar coverage. We'd come this far by taking risks. One more risk might get us the answers we needed. We go, I decided. All of us. We bring weapons, communications equipment, GPS trackers. We set up a dead man's switch, so if we don't check in by midnight, the complete report gets automatically sent to multiple news organizations. If someone wants to silence us, we make sure our findings become public anyway. The next 24 hours were tense as we prepared. Sienna set up the automated dead man's switch, uploading our report to a cloud server with instructions to distribute it widely if we didn't enter the correct password by midnight. David brought portable EM sensors so we could detect any anomalous activity. Sanders arranged for his helicopter to be on standby with another pilot who'd fly in if he didn't make radio contact by 2300 hours. At 2145 hours, we drove out to the coordinates in 2 vehicles, staying in constant radio communication. The location was about 30 miles into the proving ground, far from any established test sites or structures, just empty desert under a moonless sky. We arrived at 2155 hours and found nothing. Just sand, rocks, and scrub brush. No lights, no people, no vehicles. I checked my phone to make sure we had the right coordinates. We did. Maybe they're late, Sarah said, but her hand was on her sidearm. Then, at exactly 2200 hours, the stars went out. Not all of them. Just a section directly above us, maybe 60 feet in diameter, the same spherical void we'd documented weeks earlier, but smaller and much closer. Close enough that I could see the edge of the darkness rippling slightly, like heat shimmer in reverse. Readings are off the scale, David reported, his voice tight with fear and excitement. EM levels 10 times higher than during the April incident. Whatever this is, it's much more powerful up close. From the center of the void, a beam of blue-white light descended. Not slowly, not dramatically. It just appeared, a column connecting the void to the ground about 20 feet from our vehicles. The same light I'd seen in March, the same impossible geometry. And then, at the base of the light column, something materialized. It wasn't a vehicle. It wasn't a craft, it was a figure, roughly humanoid in shape but wrong in every detail. About 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that moved in ways that suggested more joints than humans possessed. The light made it hard to see clearly, but I caught glimpses of smooth, reflective surfaces where skin should be, of a head that was too large and too angular. Next to me, Sarah made a sound halfway between a gasp and a sob. The figure stood there for perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt like hours. It didn't move toward us, didn't make any threatening gestures. It just observed, and somehow I knew it was analyzing us with senses we didn't possess, gathering data in ways we couldn't comprehend. Then the light column retracted upward, taking the figure with it. The void collapsed in on itself exactly like it had in April, reality reassembling piece by piece until the night sky looked normal again. We stood there in shocked silence, 5 people who'd just had their understanding of the universe fundamentally altered. All our theories about advanced drones and secret military projects had evaporated in those 10 seconds of direct contact. This wasn't our technology. This was something else. Sienna found her voice first. "Did everyone see that? Tell me we all saw that." "We all saw it," Sanders confirmed. "Jesus Christ, we all saw it." My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. "You've documented my colleague's surveillance operations with admirable thoroughness. Your evidence is accurate. Now you face a choice. Continue investigating and risk exposure that would destabilize your society, or accept that some questions have answers you're not ready for. The surveillance will continue. It has for longer than your species has built cities. Recommend you focus on your own lives and let us focus on ours. This is the only warning you'll receive." I showed the message to the others. We read it together in the glow of the phone screen, each of us processing what it meant. They weren't just observing, they were responding. They knew about our investigation, knew about our documentation, and they'd revealed themselves to deliver a warning. Stop investigating or face consequences that weren't clearly defined but were implied to be severe. "What do we do?" Sarah asked. It was the question we all needed to answer. We had proof now, undeniable proof of non-human intelligence operating in our airspace. But we also had a direct message telling us to back off, to let it go, to return to our normal lives and pretend we hadn't seen what we'd seen. The smart choice was obvious. We'd gotten our answer. The phenomena were real, they were extraordinary, and they were beyond our ability to investigate or control. Continuing down this path would only put us in danger without producing any useful outcome. But the human part of me, the part that had become obsessed with understanding those light columns and radar voids, rebelled against the idea of just walking away. "I say we release the report," David said quietly. "Not to military channels, to everyone. Let the world know what's happening. Let humanity as a whole decide how to respond to this." "That's career suicide," Sanders said. "Probably actual suicide once the intelligence agencies decide we're a security threat." "We can't just ignore this," Sarah protested. "This is the biggest discovery in human history." "Is it, though?" Sienna asked. "According to that message, this surveillance has been ongoing for thousands of years. If they wanted to make contact, they would have. If they wanted to harm us, they would have. They're just watching, and apparently they've decided we're not ready to know about it officially." We argued for an hour, going in circles, weighing evidence and consequences. In the end, we reached an uncomfortable compromise. We would keep our documentation, but we wouldn't release it publicly. Not yet. We'd continue monitoring, continue collecting data, but we'd be more careful. And if the phenomena escalated, if the surveillance turned into something more threatening, we'd release everything and damn the consequences. It wasn't a satisfying resolution. None of us liked the idea of keeping this secret, of knowing that something extraordinary was happening and choosing to stay silent about it. But we were also pragmatic enough to recognize that we weren't equipped to handle the fallout from disclosure. Over the following months, we continued to observe and document, but from a distance. The voids kept appearing, following the same patterns we'd identified. Occasionally, we'd see the light columns, always at night, always in restricted areas. But we never again saw direct evidence of the beings behind the phenomena. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice. The journalist in me says we should have gone public, should have forced the conversation into the open. But the security professional knows that some truths are too destabilizing to release without careful consideration. So, the surveillance continues. The light columns appear and disappear over Arizona test sites. The radar voids move through restricted airspace. And somewhere in the night sky, beings with technology we can't comprehend watch our most advanced weapons tests with what might be curiosity or concern, or purposes we can't even imagine. We're not alone. We've never been alone. And maybe that's all we need to know for now. Thank you for listening. If you've experienced a similar phenomena, if you've seen the light columns or the voids, you're not crazy. You're not alone. Document what you see. Trust your observations. And maybe someday we'll all be ready for the truth that hovers above our test sites in the silent desert night. Good evening. What I'm about to tell you happened on October 17th, 2018, on a stretch of road that doesn't appear on any civilian maps. It's a maintenance route through the Barry M. Goldwater Range in southwestern Arizona. I was driving that road when I encountered something that still makes me question reality itself. My name is Grant Sally, and I was working as a civilian security contractor for the Air Force. My job was simple: patrol the perimeter roads at night, check fence integrity, make sure no unauthorized personnel wandered into areas where unexploded ordnance could kill them. Lonely work, but I liked it. The desert at night has a beauty most people never experience. That October night started normal. I checked in at 1800 hours and headed out in my F-250. Temperature dropping fast like it always does after sunset, going from 85 degrees to maybe 55. Clear sky, no moon, just stars. I was 40 minutes into my route when I saw the headlights. 3 sets of them, evenly spaced, stationary on the road ahead. My first thought was military convoy doing night maneuvers. But something felt wrong. No radio chatter about convoy movements, and the headlights were too bright, too perfectly white. Military vehicles use blackout lights during night operations. These were full beam, impossibly bright. I reached for the radio. Patrol 7 to base. Visual on 3 vehicles. Grid 318452 north, 113.3471 west. Confirm any authorized convoy. Static. Pure, crackling static. I tried the emergency frequency. Same result. Complete communication failure. I continued, approaching slowly. The rear vehicle was a standard military Humvee, desert tan paint, proper markings. Everything looked normal except the windows, completely dark. No interior lights, no movement, no instrument glow. I stopped 50 yards back, engine running. Protocol was to identify yourself, verify authorization. But watching those vehicles with their impossibly bright, absolutely steady headlights, I felt growing unease. No vibration, no light movement, and no sound. 3 Humvee engines should create a rumble you could hear from a quarter mile. I heard nothing but wind and my own engine. I grabbed my flashlight and sidearm and stepped out. The temperature drop was immediate and wrong. It had been 52 degrees. Now it felt freezing. My breath came out in visible clouds, something that shouldn't happen in Arizona desert. "This is security. Identify yourselves." No response. I approached the rear vehicle, flashlight on the driver's window. The Humvee looked new, no dust, no wear, but the windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I knocked with my flashlight. Nothing. Tried the door handle. Locked. I checked every door, every window. The vehicle was sealed tight. Interior completely dark. No dashboard lights. Nothing. Then I noticed the hood wasn't hot. I placed my palm on it, expecting warmth from an idling engine. The metal was cold. Not just cool, actually cold, like it had been sitting for hours, but the headlights blazed at full beam. The second and third vehicles were identical. Bright headlights, dark windows, locked doors, cold hoods. No engine sound, no vibration, no occupants. I stood in front of the lead Humvee, 10 feet from the bumper. My flashlight created sharp shadows on the ground. My legs, my arm, everything clearly defined. But the headlights weren't creating any shadow of me at all. I waved my hand, watching my flashlight cast a shadow, then looked where the Humvee's lights should have cast my body's shadow on the road. Nothing. The pavement was evenly lit, as if I wasn't there. The light was passing through me. I stepped aside and looked back. The headlights illuminated everything. Rocks, brush, trees, all casting shadows. Only I didn't. Only living things didn't. I waved my hand in the beam. No reflection, no glow. Like I was waving in twilight, not brilliant light. I backed away and jogged to my truck, still static on every frequency. My cell phone showed no signal, and the screen flickered strangely before going dark at 78% battery. I put the truck in reverse and checked my mirrors. 3 more vehicles behind me. Same configuration, same spacing, same lights. 6 vehicles total, boxing me in. My hands tightened on the wheel. I was trapped between 2 convoys that shouldn't exist. The front convoy's light suddenly brightened to blinding intensity. I shielded my eyes. Through squinted vision, I saw the beams rotating like searchlights, sweeping the desert in synchronized arcs. The temperature plummeted. My dashboard showed 34 degrees. Impossible. The rear convoy's lights began rotating too, crisscrossing beams creating a targeting grid. I cranked the wheel right and accelerated off-road. The terrain was rough, but my truck could handle it. The headlights tracked my movement. All 6 sets pivoted to follow me, moving with unnatural precision despite the vehicles being stationary. I pushed harder, suspension protesting. After 3 minutes, putting half a mile between us, the beams cut out simultaneously. All of them. Just darkness. I kept driving another minute, then stopped, shaking. I stared back at the road, no lights, no convoy, like nothing happened. My radio crackled. "Patrol 7, this is base. You missed check-in. Report status." I grabbed the handset. "Base, Patrol 7, I need to report." I encountered 6 military Humvees, grid 31-8452 north. No visible occupants. Request verification of convoy traffic. Pause. "Patrol 7, we show no other vehicles on range tonight. Your truck is the only transponder. Are you certain?" I looked at the dark road. "Base, request permission to return for debriefing." Permission granted. When I reached the road, my tire tracks were visible, but no other tracks. No evidence of 6 Humvees, like the convoy never existed. At the checkpoint, the duty officer listened with increasing skepticism. "Grant, satellite coverage shows nothing except your truck. No other vehicles. Are you feeling okay?" I had no evidence, no dashcam footage, no radio logs, no proof except my testimony. They let me finish my shift, but I could tell. the contractor who'd seen ghost vehicles. 3 days later, I met Mara Kint at a 24-hour diner in Yuma. She was a helicopter mechanic from the proving ground. Mid-30s, sharp eyes that assessed me quickly. "You look like someone who's seen something they can't explain," she said without preamble. "How did you—" "Security contractor patch. Working nights at 2 a.m. And that look, I've seen it before." She extended her hand. "Mara Kint. 5 years at Yuma. I've seen things too. Want to talk?" I told her everything. When I finished, she nodded like it made perfect sense. "Temperature drop? Electronics failing?" "Yeah, both. How did you—" "Because I've heard similar stories from 3 others in the past year. Different locations, same pattern. Vehicles or aircraft with impossible lights. Electronics failure. Temperature anomalies. 0 evidence afterward." She showed me a note file with dates and descriptions. I read accounts matching my experience. Convoys, unexplained aircraft, geometric tire tracks appearing overnight in secured areas. "Why collect this?" I asked. Mara's expression hardened. 3 months ago, my best friend disappeared. Captain Jessica Reeves, helicopter pilot. 10 years experience. She radioed in unusual ground activity, vehicles in geometric patterns, lights with no heat signatures. She requested to investigate. That was her last transmission. What happened? Officially, mechanical failure, helicopter crashed, pilot killed. But I inspected that aircraft 2 hours before her flight. Every system was perfect, and the wreckage didn't match a crash. It matched something torn apart. The diner felt too exposed. You think what she saw killed her? I think she saw something someone didn't want her to see. And you saw something similar, Grant. Whatever these are, they're real and operating with complete impunity. Someone knows about them, but they're keeping it secret from people like us who might accidentally witness something. She slid a card across. "Secure email. If you see them again, contact me immediately. And be careful. If what happened to Jessica was connected, we're playing a dangerous game." I pocketed the card, feeling like I'd crossed an invisible line. "One more thing," she said at the door. "When you see them again, and you will, don't approach. Just observe and document. Whatever they are, they notice when you get too close." The next 3 weeks passed without incident. Everything was normal. So normal, I started wondering if I'd imagined the convoy. Maybe the duty officer was right about isolation fatigue, but I couldn't explain the missing shadow. Couldn't rationalize the temperature drop or those lights tracking my truck. And I couldn't forget Mara's warning about Jessica. I started keeping detailed logs, timestamps, GPS coordinates, weather, temperature, EMF readings. Every aircraft, every test detonation, everything. If there was a pattern, meticulous documentation would find it. On November 8th, 22 days later, I saw them again. 2:17 a.m. Southern Perimeter Road, 15 miles from the first encounter. Clear night, 48 degrees, no scheduled tests. I just completed radio check-in when I rounded a curve and saw them. 4 vehicles this time. Same configuration, perfectly spaced, impossibly bright, arranged across the road. My stomach dropped. I stopped 100 yards back and grabbed my phone, keeping it charged and ready after the last time. I opened the camera and started recording, narrating everything. November 8th, 2:17 a.m., grid 317823 north, 113 or 156 west. Visual contact with 4 stationary vehicles. Lights active, no movement. I tried military radio. Static. But my civilian handheld worked fine. Whatever blocked military frequencies didn't affect civilian bands. I kept recording and drove forward. Approaching to 50 yards, temperature dropped from 48 to 42 degrees in 30 seconds. 4 Humvees confirmed, desert tan, proper markings. I stopped and took zoomed photos. The license plates were readable but nonsensical, combinations like dojo dozen and 111 instead of proper military codes. Exiting vehicle. Time now 2:19 a.m. The temperature drop hit like a wall. My phone's sensor showed 28 degrees, 20-degree drop in under 2 minutes. I approached the rear vehicle, filming everything. The interior looked wrong through the window. Too perfect, like 3D models rather than real objects. No wear, no dust, pristine to the point of being unreal. I tried the door. Locked. Checked the hood. Cold, no engine heat. But the headlights burned bright, and looking underneath I saw the light started 6 inches in front of the assemblies projecting from empty air. Headlights appear to have no point of origin, I narrated. Light begins mid-air approximately 6 inches from vehicle surface. I stood in front of them again. Same impossible result, no shadow. I waved my arms, jumped. Might as well have been a ghost. My phone chimed. Low battery at 12%, dropping from 94%. These things drained power. I moved back to my truck and connected the charger. The video had captured everything. The vehicles, temperatures, my shadow test. Then the convoy moved. Not drove, moved. The vehicles lifted 2 inches off pavement and glided forward without wheels spinning. No engine sound, no exhaust. Just perfect formation at 15 miles per hour. I followed, filming through my windshield. Convoy is mobile. No visible propulsion. Vehicles hovering above road surface. They traveled 3 miles, following road curves perfectly, then stopped at a wide section near an observation bunker. The headlights began dimming gradually over 30 seconds. As they dimmed, temperature climbed on my dashboard. When the lights went completely out, the vehicle settled onto pavement with a soft sound, both mechanical and organic, like an exhalation. They sat there for exactly 10 seconds. Then they vanished. One moment, 4 solid Humvees, the next moment empty pavement. No fade, no distortion. Instantaneous transition from presence to absence. I sat stunned, still recording. Let it run another 5 minutes, documenting empty space, recording my commentary. They're gone. Completely gone. Time 2:34 a.m. Vehicles vanished instantaneously. No tire marks, no evidence. Temperature returned to 46 degrees, approaching the location. I drove forward, examining the pavement with my flashlight. No tracks, no oil, no indication vehicles had been there. But the asphalt felt wrong. Colder, smoother in a thin strip about tire width. I photographed the surface anomaly, then tried my military radio. It worked fine now. Base, Patrol 7. Need to report another incident. Go ahead, Patrol 7. Visual confirmation of unauthorized vehicles. Grid 31.7645 north, 113.4298 west. 4 military Humvees, unusual behavior. They've departed, but I have video documentation. Long pause. Patrol 7, we show no other vehicles. Can you describe them? Standard Humvees, hovering above road, no heat signature. I have 17 minutes of video footage. Request permission to return and submit evidence. Patrol 7, maintain position. Supervisor en route. ETA 20 minutes. Colonel Sarah Edmonds arrived 23 minutes later with 2 MPs. Her presence, a full colonel for a contractor's report, was unusual. Mr. Sally, show me where this occurred. I walked her through everything. She listened without comment, expression unreadable. The MPs photographed the road surface, including the unusual texture areas. I have video, I said, showing my phone. Everything I described is recorded. She watched the entire recording, face growing serious. When finished, she handed the phone to an MP and turned to me. "Mr. Sally, come with us to main office for detailed debriefing. This raises serious security questions." Over 3 hours, I was interviewed by Colonel Edmonds, intelligence officers, and eventually a 3-star general who'd flown in specifically. They watched the video multiple times, studied EMF readings, examined the data. "The void formation," the general said, replaying a section. "You're certain this was physical, not optical illusion?" "Sir, my EMF meter registered field strengths requiring a small power plant's worth of power. Temperature drop recorded by 3 thermometers. This was physical and real." The general looked at the civilian from before. "Mr. Sally, what you witnessed matches patterns we've tracked for 73 years. We call them convergence events, moments when these entities create temporary entry points into our space. Vehicles, lights, electromagnetic interference, all part of a process we don't understand. But the result is always the same. Void forms, figures appear, they conduct activity, everything disappears. What are they doing?" "We don't know," the civilian admitted. "Analysis suggests observation, studying our technology. But sometimes they manipulate matter. Road becoming fluid, molecular changes near convergence points. They're not just watching. They're testing boundaries between their reality and ours." "Are they hostile?" "Not overtly," Colonel Edmonds said. "But personnel who got too close have experienced complications, equipment failures, health issues, in some cases fatalities. Like Captain Jessica Reeves, she attempted direct contact with figures during a convergence event. Her helicopter came apart. Stress fractures consistent with extreme vibrational frequencies. So they can kill us? They affect matter in ways we're only beginning to understand," the general said. "Which is why, Mr. Sally, document, observe, but never attempt contact. They tolerate distant observation, but close approach may trigger defensive responses." I left with the new equipment and unanswered questions. The military knew about these convoys, had been documenting them for years, but they were as confused as I was. I met Mara 2 days later at the same diner. I showed her the video, described the debriefing, the equipment. "They're watching you now," she said. "The equipment is for monitoring you as much as documentation. You're part of their network, whether you like it or not. They know about you too. The colonel implied they're aware of your investigation. Be careful." "I'm always careful, but I'm not stopping." She pulled out her tablet, showing a map covered in red dots. Every documented sighting over 5 years, over 200 incidents. The heaviest concentration was around Yuma, Goldwater, White Sands, and Nellis, but there were outliers too. "Now watch." She applied a time filter showing only the last 6 months. The scattered pattern consolidated into clear clusters, highest at Goldwater. "They're focusing on specific locations, getting more active." She brought up a graph. 6 years ago, 1 or 2 sightings monthly. 3 years ago, 5 or 6. Now we're at 20 to 30 monthly and climbing. She zoomed on Goldwater. "This is where both your encounters happened, where Jessica went down, and exactly where they're testing a new drone defense system next month. Not weapons. Defensive system to detect unauthorized aircraft." The implication was clear. They know the test schedule? Or trying to understand a system that might detect them. If you're conducting surveillance and the target develops technology that might expose you, wouldn't you study it beforehand? It made disturbing sense. These weren't random, they were reconnaissance. "There's more," Mara continued. historical records from the 1950s and 60s, atmospheric nuclear tests. Security personnel reported similar phenomena: unexplained vehicles, impossible lights, equipment failures. Same reports filed and classified. Whatever these are, they've been observing our tests for 70 years. My phone buzzed. Text from Colonel Edmonds. Report to main office immediately, new tasking. They're moving me, probably somewhere they can control what I see. Or somewhere they expect activity and want documentation, Mara countered. Either way, go, but keep a personal log separate from official reports. Document everything. Send me copies. At the office, Colonel Edmonds assigned me to a new patrol sector, the same area where they'd test the drone defense system in 3 weeks. We're expecting increased activity in this sector, she explained. Given your encounters and reliable documentation, we want you monitoring specifically. If phenomena appear, you'll be positioned to gather data. I was bait. They were putting me where convoys most likely appeared, hoping I'd draw them out. Dangerous, potentially deadly, but also an opportunity for answers. I'll start patrols tonight, I said. The first week in the new patrol sector was quiet. Too quiet. Same routes nightly, documenting everything, reporting every aircraft and distant explosion. But no convoys, no impossible lights, nothing unusual. The silence felt wrong, like calm before a storm. Mara's research predicted increased activity, especially as the drone defense test approached. Yet there was nothing. On the 8th night, November 16th, everything changed. I was conducting a standard perimeter check around 11:45 p.m. when my EMF meter started registering unusual readings. Pulsing spikes suggesting something actively transmitting nearby. I followed the signal, watching the needle climb. The source was at a junction where 3 maintenance roads converged. And they weren't alone this time. 12 vehicles. 12 military Humvees arranged in a perfect circle, facing outward, headlights creating a dome of intersecting beams overhead. The most elaborate configuration I'd seen. I stopped 200 yards out and started recording with all equipment. Camera, EMF meter, radiation detector, all running. Temperature gauge showed a rapid 15-degree drop in 30 seconds. My new radio emitted static. I cycled channels, found channel 9 with a signal. Not base, but another voice stressed. Anyone receiving? We have multiple unknowns in grid sector 7. Repeat, multiple unknowns forming perimeter. Base, do you copy? I keyed the mic. This is civilian contractor Grant Sally. Visual on same phenomena. Are you military? Contractor Sally, Lieutenant Mark Reeves, airborne 2 miles south. Reading massive EM interference, instruments haywire. Your situation. Reeves, same last name. Lieutenant, related to Captain Jessica Reeves? Pause. She was my sister. Why? Because I've been investigating her crash. Sir, what she encountered before she went down is what we're seeing now. Maintain altitude and distance. These are dangerous. Copy. Holding at 1,500 feet. Fuel erratic, but I have 20 minutes. Can you approach for close-range documentation? I looked at the circle with their light dome. Getting close meant entering whatever field they generated. But Lieutenant Reeves deserved to know what really happened to his sister. I'm approaching now, maintaining open channel. I drove forward, narrating. Range 150 yards. EMF increasing exponentially. Temperature 31 degrees. At 100 yards, my engine sputtered. Dashboard flickered, electrical system struggling. I put in neutral and let momentum carry me 30 more yards before the engine died. Lost primary power. Continuing on foot. Negative, Sally. Don't approach. That's exactly what Jessica, his transmission cut. I saw his helicopter in the distance, navigation lights flickering. He was experiencing power drain too, even at altitude. I grabbed my camera and stepped out. The cold hit immediately. Breath in thick clouds, frost forming on my jacket, maybe 15 degrees. The vehicles sat in their circle. Within the light dome, something was forming. A distortion, like wrong heat shimmer. Light bent around it, creating a spherical darkness in the center. I zoomed in. Through the lens, I saw it clearly, a perfect void growing larger. It looked exactly like radar-documented voids, but seeing it form in real time was profoundly unsettling. From above, Reeves's engine changed note, climbing, but sounding wrong, rough and missing. Sally, getting warnings across the board. Multiple failures need to break off before this brings me down. Understood, get clear. What about you? Getting documentation, just go. His helicopter turned away, engine fading. I was alone. The void suddenly expanded, doubling size instantly. A vibration accompanied it, felt in my chest and skull. A resonance making my teeth ache and vision blur. I kept filming despite instincts screaming to run. This happened to Jessica. I needed to document it. The lights brightened to pain. I looked away, blinking spots. When I could see again, the void had changed. Not empty anymore. Structure inside, geometric patterns like fractals suspended in 3 dimensions, and figures. Tall, impossibly thin, moving with gravity-ignoring grace. 5 of them examining something I couldn't see from my angle. I stepped closer for a better view. All 5 stopped and turned toward my direction. Not toward me specifically, they couldn't see through the light dome, but they'd sensed my movement. One raised what might have been an arm. The gesture was fluid and alien. The void responded. It collapsed inward, shrinking from 50 feet to 10 in under a second. Headlights dimmed simultaneously. Temperature started climbing, warmth returning, frost melting. The void and figures faded, becoming translucent, then transparent, then gone. But the vehicles remained, still in their circle, lights now at normal intensity. I approached the nearest Humvee, still recording. Up close, the paint wasn't just clean, perfect. No imperfections, just flawless color absorbing light. Tires showed no wear, no dust. I touched the hood. Solid, real metal, cold. I knocked, hollow metallic response. But looking underneath, I saw something impossible. No mechanical components. No drive shaft, transmission, fuel tank. Just smooth surfaces and empty space. These were shells with no functional internals. They couldn't drive because they had no engines. I moved to the next vehicle, same thing, then the next. All 12 were hollow shells, physical objects with no mechanical basis. These weren't vehicles, they were constructs, 3-dimensional projections given physical form. I was so focused I almost didn't notice when they started sinking. Not collapsing, sinking, pulled down into pavement itself. The road rippled around each vehicle, becoming fluid. I stepped back and filmed it. 30 seconds for all 12 to disappear below ground, pavement flowing like water. When completely submerged, the road solidified again. Normal asphalt with no indication anything passed through. I knelt and touched the spot. Pavement felt normal, rough, solid. Just road surface that moments before had been behaving like liquid. My radio crackled. Patrol 7, this is base. Received partial transmission from Lieutenant Reeves reporting phenomena. Your status? Base, Patrol 7. I have extensive video and sensor data. Request permission to return for debriefing. Permission granted. Proceed to main office. Colonel Edmonds is waiting. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. Colonel Edmonds, the civilian, 2 intelligence officers, and eventually a 3-star general. They watched video multiple times, studied EMF readings, examined radiation data. The void formation, the general said, replaying it. You're certain this was physical, not optical illusion? Sir, my EMF meter registered field strengths requiring a power plant's worth of power, temperature drop recorded by 3 thermometers, and Lieutenant Reeves observed the same from altitude before his helicopter experienced failures. This was physical and real. And you saw figures inside? Humanoid shapes? Yes, sir. 5 of them examining something. The general looked at the civilian. Mr. Sally, what you witnessed matches patterns we've tracked for 73 years. We call them convergence events, moments when these entities create temporary entry points into our physical space. The vehicles, lights, electromagnetic interference are all part of a process we don't understand. But the result is always the same. Void forms, figures appear, they conduct activity, everything disappears. What are they doing? We don't know, the civilian admitted. Analysis suggests observation, studying our technology, but they also manipulate physical matter, road becoming fluid, molecular changes near convergence points. They're not just watching, they're testing boundaries between their reality and ours. The civilian's expression darkened. Captain Reeves attempted direct contact with figures during a convergence event. She hovered too close, ignored warnings. Her helicopter's airframe showed stress fractures consistent with exposure to intense vibrational frequencies. Proximity to convergence fields can cause catastrophic failures. So, they can kill us? They affect physical matter in ways we're only beginning to understand, the general said. Document, observe, but never attempt direct contact. They tolerate distant observation, but close approach may trigger defensive responses. I spent the next 2 hours going through every frame of video with the technical team, identifying details I'd missed in the moment. The figures inside the void had been manipulating geometric patterns of light, patterns that the analyst said resembled advanced mathematics, or perhaps a form of writing. The vehicle's appearance and disappearance correlated with spikes in specific electromagnetic frequencies that they'd been tracking but hadn't understood until now. When I left, exhausted and overwhelmed, Lieutenant Mark Reeves waited in the parking lot, worn and haunted. Mr. Sally, did my sister see what we saw tonight before she died? I could have lied, but he deserved truth. Yes, based on what I learned, she encountered a convergence event. She got too close trying to understand, and it cost her life. I'm sorry. He nodded slowly. At least now I know. At least I know she wasn't crazy or careless. She saw something real, something extraordinary. That's better than thinking she made mistakes. Your sister was brave. These are terrifying, but she approached them because that's what good officers do. Are you going to keep investigating? Yeah. Someone needs to figure out what they're doing here. And I'm apparently one of the lucky few who encounters them regularly and lives to tell about it. Be careful. Don't make Jessica's mistake. Don't get too close. I promised I wouldn't. But driving home in pre-dawn darkness, I thought about those figures in the void, about vehicles that weren't vehicles, about road becoming fluid. These beings had technology so advanced it looked like magic. They could create doorways between realities. They could manipulate matter at molecular level, and they were becoming more active. Mara had been right. The pattern was escalating. The question, why now? I met Mara 3 days later at a secure location, abandoned mining building 40 miles from any installation. She'd heard about my encounter through her network. 12 vehicles this time, she said, pulling up her map. Largest formation anyone's recorded, and a void big enough for multiple entities. Major escalation. The general called it a convergence event. They've been tracking these for 7 decades, but they still don't know what the entities are or their purpose. She zoomed on Goldwater. Your convergence happened exactly where they're testing the drone defense system, 8 days from now. Not coincidence. They're scouting ahead of time, or trying to disable it before operational. If that system can detect a stealth aircraft with unprecedented accuracy, what would it pick up during a convergence event? We might finally track these voids, see where they come from, maybe predict when they'll appear. That's a threat to their operation. If these entities saw our technology as threat, we could be heading toward confrontation. I need to be there during the test, I said. Edmonds won't allow it. High security event. Then I won't ask permission. I know the back routes, observation points with clear sight lines. I can position myself outside official perimeter. Mara showed me a topographical map. This ridge overlooks the entire test range from 2 miles out. Clear sight lines with telephoto lens, technically outside restricted perimeter. Park here, hike in 30 minutes. Be in position well before the test. Will you be there? I'll be monitoring from Yuma. I have access to radar systems. If anything appears, I'll send an alert. We'll document from multiple angles. The test was scheduled for 2:00 a.m. on November 25th. I positioned myself on the ridge at 11 p.m. Temperature mid-30s, stars brilliant. At 1:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mara. Void forming 3 miles north of test site. Large signature, possibly multiple convergence points. They're here. I trained my telephoto lens. The defense system was visible. Radar installations, sensor arrays, all operational. Beyond it, a faint glow. Blue-white light, same as vehicle headlights. The glow intensified. Not one source, but multiple. 12 points forming a circle. Another convoy, another convergence appearing right on schedule. My radio crackled. We have multiple unknown contacts, bearing 020, range 3 miles. Classification uncertain. Heat signatures negative. Radar return solid but impossible velocities. Recommend abort. Negative. This is what the system is designed to detect. Continue protocol. Let's see what we're dealing with. The defense system activated fully, sending directed radar pulses. I could see energy waves on my EMF meter, hear the system's whine even from 2 miles. The void responded. It expanded catastrophically, going from 50 feet to 200 in an instant. Lights brightened to miniature suns, and from the center, a beam shot upward. Not diffuse glow, but coherent column, visible even through night vision. The defense system's displays went dark simultaneously. Every screen, radar array, sensor, complete failure. I watched technicians scrambling, emergency lights kicking on, but damage was done. Whatever pulse the void sent, it fried every piece of equipment. The defense system, designed to detect the most advanced stealth technology, had been neutralized in seconds. The void held 90 seconds, then collapsed. The beam cut out, the circle dimmed and vanished. Desert was dark again. Radio came alive with panic. All systems down, repeat, all systems down. Catastrophic electronic failure. Request immediate support and security sweep. My phone buzzed. Mara, did you get that? Please tell me you got that. I texted, I got everything. And I think we found out why they're escalating. They see our technology advancing, see us developing systems that might detect them. They're not going to let that happen. Next morning, Colonel Edmonds summoned me. She looked exhausted. Good news, you're not being arrested for unauthorized observation. Bad news, footage of an event that officially never happened is now classified at highest level. You're signing paperwork that makes previous NDA look like a permission slip. What happened out there? Analysis suggests defensive response. The system's high-power radar triggered protection protocol. The electromagnetic pulse wasn't targeted, indiscriminate, frying everything electronic within 3 miles. If they'd wanted real damage, they could have. They just neutralized immediate threat and left. So, what now? We accept they can shut down any system we develop? Now we get smarter. Study the data. Figure out their defensive pulse signature. Develop systems that can operate through it. This is going to take decades, Mr. Sally. But every encounter, every data point, brings us closer to understanding. She slid a folder across. New assignment. Full-time documentation specialist for unexplained phenomena across southwestern testing ranges. Better pay, better equipment, official authorization to be wherever convergence events occur. You can get close enough to document without getting killed. We need that capability. I accepted. Over following months, I documented 12 more convergence events across 4 facilities. Each added to understanding, revealed new capabilities, showed us patterns. Mara continued independent research, cross-referencing my official documentation with her network. Together, we built the most comprehensive database outside classified channels. And the entities kept coming. More frequently, more boldly, conducting increasingly elaborate operations. They were studying us. But we were studying them too, learning their patterns, understanding their technology, slowly figuring out operational rules. They weren't hostile, but weren't friendly either. Intelligence so advanced it might as well have been alien, technology making our systems look like stone tools, operating with complete immunity to detection. But they'd made one mistake. They'd revealed themselves to people like me, like Mara, like Lieutenant Reeves. They'd shown us their capabilities and in doing so, given us something to analyze, to understand, to eventually match. It would take years, maybe decades. But humanity doesn't give up easily, and we're very good at figuring out how things work. The empty convoys, the shadowless lights, the convergence voids, all data, all information. And information once gained could be weaponized. I still drive those desert roads at night, still watch for lights that don't cast shadows. And sometimes, during witching hours between midnight and dawn, I see them. Empty convoys that aren't convoys, but doorways between realities. Demonstrations of technology we can't yet understand. But we will understand. Eventually. Because that's what humans do. We observe, we analyze, we adapt. And these beings are going to discover what happens when you reveal yourself to a species that refuses to accept being watched without watching back. Thank you for listening. If you're working security at military installations, if you're flying night patrols over testing ranges, keep your eyes open. Document what you see. You're not alone in witnessing the impossible. The empty convoys are out there right now, driving roads they weren't built to drive, watching us with lights that cast no shadows, and we're watching them right back. Good evening. What I'm about to share happened on December 3rd, 2019, during a surveillance drone operation over the Sonoran Desert test site in Arizona. I'm Riley Vaughn, civilian drone operator for a military contractor. What started as standard reconnaissance made me question everything. That December night was cold, 38 degrees, clear skies, minimal wind. Perfect for drone operations. I was stationed 5 miles from the main facility, operating a DJI Matrice 300 equipped with thermal and visual cameras, surveying a 10-square-mile sector along the northern boundary. Diego Harlan was my ground spotter, positioned half a mile away with binoculars and radio. Former Army, knew the desert, took the work seriously. I launched at 11:47 p.m. Battery 100%, GPS strong, all systems green. The drone climbed to 400 feet. Drone airborne, I reported. Beginning sector sweep. Copy, I have visual. 23 minutes in, the drone was over Zone 7 Charlie, 3 miles north. Typical Sonoran desert below. Rocks, sparse vegetation, dry washes, nothing unusual. Then the feed cut out. Both screens went black instantly. Not flickering, just instant darkness. My stomach dropped. I checked the control tablet. All telemetry normal. Altitude 398 feet, GPS updating, battery 87%, signal 78%. The drone was fine, connection solid, but both camera feeds stayed black. Diego, I've lost visual. Do you have eyes on the drone? Affirmative. Navigation lights visible. Drone appears steady. The blackout lasted maybe 1 second. Then both feeds snapped back to normal. No fade, no corruption. Feeds are back. That was strange. I marked the timestamp, 00:11:34. Brief interruption. Approximately 1 second, cause unknown. Then continued the survey without other issues. Total flight 96 minutes. Battery at 12% remaining. About right for the distance and cold temperature. Post-flight, I downloaded footage and checked logs. Standard routine. But when I reviewed the video, something was wrong. At timestamp 00:11:32, normal terrain. At 00:11:33, black screen. And it stayed black. Not for 1 second like I'd experienced, but 4 full seconds. The timestamp jumped from 00:11:33 to 00:11:37, with nothing but black frames between. I backed it up, watched again. Same result. 4 seconds of nothing. Thermal camera file, identical 4-second blackout, perfectly synchronized. But I knew I'd only seen black screens for 1 second. I'd counted 1001, and the feeds came back before I finished. The drone's internal flight log showed 0:11:32.847, all systems nominal. 0:11:33, UAV, all systems nominal. 0:11:37.301, all systems nominal. 4 seconds of missing entries. The drone had jumped forward in time. One moment at 0:11:33, next moment at 0:11:37, with no record of what happened between. Why had I only experienced 1 second when the actual duration was 4? I radioed Diego. That feed interruption, how long did it last from your perspective? Pause. Maybe a second. Why? Because the footage shows 4 seconds, and the logs show a 4-second timestamp gap, but both of us only perceived 1 second. That doesn't make sense. Come over. I want you to see this. Diego arrived 15 minutes later. I showed him everything. He checked the data himself, came to the same conclusion. Something had happened during those 4 seconds that neither of us witnessed, and the drone had no memory of recording. Buffer error, he suggested. Both cameras and flight computer? Identical corruption at the exact timestamp. That's not a buffer error. I pulled up the GPS coordinates from the blackout. 32.8423 DGN, 113.1876 DGWW. Cross-referenced with our sector map. Unremarkable desert in northern Zone 7. Charlie, about 200 yards east of a dry wash. We should fly over it again, Diego said. See if we can replicate it. I checked the time, 02:17 a.m. You want to go back out tonight? Might as well, if something's causing interference. It could be a security concern. He had a point. I prepped the drone with backup recording on a separate device. Diego repositioned with clear sight to where the first blackout occurred. Ground spotter in position. Diego radioed at 02:34. 800 yards south of target coordinates. Launching now. Second flight started normal. I flew directly to the anomaly coordinates, approaching from south at 400 feet. Same terrain. Empty desert, rocks, minimal vegetation. Coming up on target area, passing over coordinates now. Feeds remain stable. No blackout. I circled the area at different altitudes. Everything functioned perfectly. After 20 minutes, I was about to call it when Diego's voice crackled, urgent and confused. "Riley, hold position. Don't move the drone." "What is it?" "The shadow. The drone's shadow on the ground. It's wrong." "What do you mean?" "It's pointing the wrong direction. Moon is behind me to the south. Shadows should fall north. But the drone's shadow is falling south, pointing at the light source instead of away from it." I felt a chill. "That's impossible." "I know. But I'm looking right at it, clear as day, pointing the wrong direction." "Can you photograph it?" "Trying now?" My phone buzzed with the image. The photo clearly showed the desert floor with the drone's shadow, dark shape with 4 propellers distinguishable. And the shadow was pointing south toward the moon, defying basic physics. "Riley, there's something else. The shadow is moving. The drone is hovering steady. Shadow should be steady too." "I know, but it's drifting north on its own, like it's disconnected from the drone." This was wrong. Shadows don't point toward light. Shadows don't move independently. Bringing the bird home. I initiated return to home. 4-minute journey according to GPS. "The shadow isn't following anymore," Diego said, strained. "Drone heading south to you, shadow still drifting north. They're separating. 50 feet displaced, 60, it's accelerating." The drone completed return and settled onto the pad. I powered down and checked status. Battery showed 94%. I stared. When I'd initiated return, battery was at 78%. The flight back should have consumed another 10 to 12%, bringing it to around 66%. Instead, it had gained 16% charge. Batteries don't recharge themselves while in use. I pulled flight logs. Second flight lasted 34 minutes by my watch, but according to the drone's internal clock, only 18 minutes. Another impossible discrepancy. Diego arrived, breathing hard. "Did you see the battery?" 94%. Impossible. And the shadow kept drifting north for 2 more minutes after you landed. I watched it move 200 yards before it just faded out. We stood there trying to find any rational explanation. Time discrepancies. Shadows moving independently and pointing wrong. Batteries gaining charge. "We need to report this," Diego said. "Report what? That shadows don't follow physics? They'll think we're crazy." "We have photos, video, flight logs showing impossible data. That's evidence." At 04:15 a.m., I sent the preliminary report noting unusual technical anomalies. Then we packed up and headed back, too wired to sleep. When I finally made it home at dawn, I tried to sleep but couldn't stop thinking about those missing 4 seconds. About a shadow moving on its own. About a battery recharging in use. I fell asleep around 8 a.m. When I woke 6 hours later, I had 3 missed calls from my supervisor and a text. "Need to see you immediately. Do not discuss the incident with anyone. Report to main office at 1600 hours." I'd triggered something. Someone higher up already knew exactly what it was. I arrived at 15:45 hours. Security confiscated my phone, recording devices, smartwatch. Standard for classified briefings, but it made me nervous. My supervisor, Marcus Ortiz, met me in the lobby. Late 50s, former Air Force, had seen enough classified weirdness to not get rattled. But he looked rattled now. "Riley, come with me. Conference room C." "Is Diego coming?" "Already there." Conference room C was in the secure wing. Windowless, sound dampened, equipment scanning for recording devices. Diego was seated at the table, looking uncomfortable. Also present, Dr. Sarah Reeves from Technical Analysis Division and Colonel Nathan Price from Special Operations Research. Not real division names. Vague titles for things not supposed to have official names. Mr. Vaughn, Mr. Harlan, Colonel Price began. What you experienced matches a pattern we've been tracking for 8 years. You're the 15th and 16th operators to report time discrepancies, shadow anomalies, and power fluctuations in that sector. Diego and I exchanged glances. 15 other incidents, never mentioned in any briefing. Dr. Reeves pulled up a map showing the test site with multiple red markers. Each marker represents a drone anomaly similar to yours. Time gaps, navigation errors, power anomalies. They cluster in 3 zones, and Zone 7 Charlie, where you encountered this, is the most active. What's causing it? I asked. We don't know, Colonel Price admitted. We have theories, no definitive answers. The phenomena interferes with electronics in specific ways, disrupting time perception, creating electromagnetic anomalies, producing visual manifestations that violate known optical principles. Like shadows pointing the wrong direction, Diego said. Exactly. Mr. Harlan, you documented what we call a shadow displacement event. 4th time photographed, clearest images we've obtained. Dr. Reeves showed Diego's photos. Analysis suggests these aren't traditional shadows. They appear to be dark projections, possibly created by unknown directed energy or field effects. Something was creating a fake shadow? I asked. Or something occupied the same physical space as your drone, creating its own shadow. During the time discrepancy, your drone may have been displaced or duplicated in ways we don't understand. My head hurt. Displaced to where? That's the question. Telemetry shows consistent position, but the 4-second gap suggests the drone's sensors stopped functioning or stopped recording observable reality. Something interrupted normal information flow. Colonel Price leaned forward. We need complete confidentiality. Sign NDAs with serious legal consequences if violated. Second, we need you to continue operating in that sector. With knowledge of what to look for, you'll be valuable observers. You want us to go back? Diego sounded incredulous. We want you to help us understand what this is. Every incident provides data. You'll be equipped with additional monitoring equipment, specialized cameras, direct communication to our analysis team. And if we say no, then we'll reassign you and find other operators. But I'd prefer keeping you both. You handled unusual situations calmly and documented thoroughly. That's valuable. Dr. Reeves added, despite 15 incidents, we've had no injuries, no permanent equipment damage. Whatever this is, it doesn't appear hostile, simply anomalous. Diego looked at me, weighing the decision. I'm in, I said, but I want access to data from previous incidents. Agreed, Colonel Price said. Dr. Reeves will provide redacted reports, weekly briefings to discuss patterns. Diego nodded. I'm in, but I want better photography equipment. Done. Upgraded gear by tomorrow evening. Report back Wednesday at 2000 hours. We spent 3 hours reviewing reports. The pattern was clear. Started in 2011 with a single 10-second gap. Over 8 years, incidents increased from 1 or 2 yearly to nearly monthly. Consistent characteristics. Time gaps in recordings not matching operator perception. Battery anomalies, usually higher charge than expected. Visual anomalies including shadow displacement. Strong electromagnetic field readings. No timing pattern. Different hours, weather, altitudes, But one pattern stood out. Every incident within 5 miles of specific coordinates, 32.851 degrees N, 113.193 degree W, heart of Zone 7, Charlie. Has anyone investigated these coordinates directly? I asked. Multiple ground surveys, nothing there. Just desert, rocks, dry wash. No structures, no unusual geological features. Diego had been studying chronologically. Frequency is increasing. 2011 to 2015, 1 per year. 2016 to 2017, 3 yearly. 2018, 8 incidents. 2019, 15 so far. Correct, Dr. Reeves confirmed. Escalation is concerning. We finished around 2100 hours. Over the next 2 days, Diego and I were equipped with new gear. High-sensitivity cameras, EMF meters, GPS trackers with millisecond precision, all synchronized and backed up. Dr. Reeves trained us on precursor indicators, equipment behavior before anomalies, temperature changes, GPS variations. There's usually 30 to 60 seconds of buildup. Learn to recognize it, you'll have advance warning. Wednesday evening, we were back at our positions for our first official flight since the incident. Ground spotter in position, Diego radioed at 2015. All monitoring online. Launching now. For 3 hours, I flew the sector without incident. Empty desert, scattered rocks, occasional thermal signatures. At 23:17 hours, the EMF meter spiked. Instantly, from baseline to 3 times normal. GPS dropped from 9 satellites to 4. Compass rotating slowly, the drone held steady. Diego, I'm seeing precursor indicators. EMF spike, GPS degradation, compass anomaly. Are you getting anything on your instruments? Affirmative. My EMF meter just went crazy. And Riley, the temperature just dropped. I'm reading 42 degrees, which is wrong. It was 54 degrees 30 seconds ago. I checked the drone's location. It was approaching the center coordinates that Dr. Reeves had identified, the focal point where all previous incidents had clustered. I'm at the hot spot, I reported. Continuing surveillance. All recording systems are active. The visual feed remained stable, but I could see anomalies in the telemetry. The altimeter showed the drone at 403 feet, then 397 feet, then 405 feet, all within a span of 3 seconds while I was holding steady altitude input. The battery percentage flickered between 72% and 75%, unable to settle on a consistent reading. Riley, there's something on the ground below your drone. What kind of something? I don't know. It's not showing on your thermal, but I can see it with the visual spectrum camera. There's a shape on the ground, circular, maybe 30 feet in diameter. It's dark, darker than the surrounding terrain, and it's moving. I switched my view to the downward-facing visual camera and enhanced the image. Diego was right. There was a circular dark area on the ground directly below the drone. Darker than the surrounding desert should be under moonlight. And it was definitely moving, shifting position independent of the drone's movement. Is it a shadow? I don't think so. Shadows don't move like that. It's more like the ground itself is darker in that spot. Or like something is blocking light that should be reflecting off the surface. The EMF reading spiked again, and suddenly both camera feeds cut to black. But this time I was ready for it. I kept my eyes on the timer, counting the seconds out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. The feeds came back at 4, showing the desert floor exactly as it had been before. But when I checked the recording timestamp, I knew what I'd find. An 8-second gap. I'd counted 4 seconds of blackout, but the actual missing time was twice that. Diego, how long was I dark from your perspective? maybe 2 seconds, definitely not more than 3. So we'd each experienced different durations again. I'd perceived 4 seconds. Diego had seen 2 or 3, but the actual recording gap would be longer than both. Time was not consistent for any of us during these events. Riley, the circular shape on the ground is expanding. It was 30 feet, now it's closer to 50. And the drone's shadow, I can see it now, it's separated again. The shadow is inside the circle, but your drone is hovering about 100 feet west of it. I looked at the GPS coordinates. The drone showed it was at 32.855 in degrees N, 113.928 degrees W. I marked those coordinates and asked, "Where does it look like the drone is from your position?" "Directly over the circle. I'm looking right at it." But the GPS said otherwise. According to telemetry, the drone was 100 feet west of where Diego saw it. 2 different realities, 2 different positions, both apparently true from different perspectives. Dr. Reeves, I called on the secure channel they'd set up. "We have active phenomena, multiple anomalies, time gap, position displacement, shadow separation. I'm recording everything." Her voice came back immediately. "Copy that. Maintain observation if safe. We're monitoring your telemetry feed and we confirm the anomalies. This is significant data." The EMF meter was holding at elevated levels, fluctuating between 3 and 5 times baseline. The temperature reading from Diego's ground sensors showed it had dropped to 31 degrees, a 23-degree drop from normal ambient temperature. And then I saw something that made no sense at all. On the thermal camera, which had been showing normal ground temperature readings, a shape appeared. Not hot, not cold, completely black, showing as absolute 0 temperature. A shape that shouldn't be possible because absolute 0 is 459 seconds in 7 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze air itself. Nothing in the desert should register that cold. The shape was roughly spherical, maybe 20 feet in diameter, hovering about 50 feet above the ground. Right where Diego had seen the circular dark patch. "Diego, do you see anything at elevation? About 50 feet up, over that circle?" "Negative. I don't see anything in the air. Just the dark patch on the ground. I'm getting a thermal signature of absolute 0 at that location. A sphere hovering in midair. That's impossible. Nothing can be that cold." "I know, but that's what the sensor shows." I zoomed the visual camera to maximum magnification, pointing it at the location where the thermal signature appeared. On visual, I saw nothing, just empty air, but the thermal camera showed that impossible sphere of absolute cold, hanging in the desert night like a hole in reality. "Dr. Reeves, are you seeing this thermal data?" "We're seeing it. It matches 3 previous incidents where operators reported similar absolute 0 signatures. We don't have an explanation for it." The sphere began to move. Not quickly, but deliberately, drifting north at what looked like maybe 5 miles per hour. As it moved, the circular dark patch on the ground moved with it, maintaining position directly below the sphere. "It's moving," I reported. "Heading north, approximately 5 mph. Follow it," Dr. Reeves instructed. "Maintain safe distance but keep it in sensor range." I adjusted the drone's position, keeping it behind and above the anomalous sphere. For 10 minutes I tracked it as it drifted across the desert, moving in a perfectly straight line toward the northern boundary of our sector. Then it stopped. Just froze in position, hovering over a particular spot of empty desert. The EMF reading spiked again, and the temperature drop intensified. Diego reported his sensors showing 23 degrees now, a 31-degree drop from baseline. The sphere on my thermal camera began to change. It expanded, doubling in size over the course of maybe 15 seconds, growing from 20 feet to 40 feet in diameter. And as it expanded, it began to rotate, not spinning like a ball, but rotating in a way that hurt to look at, like it was turning inside out or moving through dimensions that my eyes couldn't properly perceive. Diego, are you seeing any changes to the ground shape? Yeah, the circle is getting bigger, and there are patterns inside it, like geometric shapes forming and dissolving. Triangles, hexagons, things I don't have names for. They're made of darkness, like someone is drawing with shadow. I looked at the visual camera feed, pointing it down at the ground where Diego was watching. I could see the geometric patterns he'd described, complex interlocking shapes that formed, shifted, and reformed in endless combinations. Dark patterns against darker ground, visible only because of the contrast with the surrounding illuminated desert. And then the sphere vanished, not gradually, but in an instant. One frame showing the absolute zero signature on thermal, the next frame showing normal air temperature, like it had never been there. The geometric patterns on the ground faded more slowly, dissolving over maybe 10 seconds until the desert floor looked normal again. The EMF readings dropped back to baseline. The temperature began climbing back toward normal levels. Whatever it had been, it was gone. Phenomenon has ended, I reported. All instruments returning to normal readings. Diego, confirm visual? Confirmed. The ground patterns are gone. Everything looks normal. I checked the drone's battery, 89%. It had gained 17% charge during the encounter. Exactly the kind of impossible power anomaly we'd seen before. I brought the drone back to base and landed it, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. We'd just witnessed something profound, something that challenged basic physics, a sphere of absolute zero temperature hovering in midair, geometric shadow patterns forming on the ground, position displacement where the drone appeared to be in two places at once. Dr. Reeves was calling on the radio before I'd even powered down. Exceptional work, both of you. That was the most comprehensive documentation of an active event we've obtained. We need you to come in immediately for debriefing while the details are fresh. The debriefing lasted until 400 hours. We went over every second of the encounter, every instrument reading, every observation. Dr. Reeves and Colonel Price reviewed the footage multiple times, taking notes, cross-referencing with previous incidents. This changes things, Colonel Price said finally. The sphere phenomenon, the geometric ground patterns, these are new elements we haven't seen before, or at least haven't documented this clearly. It suggests the phenomena is more complex than we understood. What does it mean? Diego asked. It means we're not dealing with simple electromagnetic anomalies or natural phenomena. The geometric patterns suggest intentional design. The sphere's movement appeared deliberate, not random. This is starting to look less like environmental effects and more like technology. Dr. Reeves added, the absolute zero thermal signature is particularly troubling. Creating that temperature would require energy manipulation on a scale we don't have technology for. If something can create localized zones of absolute zero in open air, it's operating on principles we don't understand. So, what are we looking at? I asked. What's your best theory? Colonel Price and Dr. Reeves exchanged glances. Finally, the colonel said, our best theory is that we're observing some form of advanced technology, either experimental human technology that's being tested without our knowledge, or something non-human in origin. The patterns, the precision, the seemingly impossible physics, it all suggests engineering rather than natural phenomena. Non-human technology. They were saying it without saying it. UAP, the thing I'd been trying not to think about. If it's non-human, Diego said quietly, then what does it want? Why is it here? We don't know, Dr. Reeves admitted. It doesn't communicate. It doesn't interfere beyond creating these localized anomalies. It observes. It creates patterns. It manipulates physics in ways we can't explain, and then it leaves. If it has a purpose, we haven't determined what it is. We were released at dawn with instructions to rest and return for another flight in 2 nights. As I drove home, exhausted and overwhelmed, I couldn't stop thinking about that sphere of impossible cold, about geometric patterns drawn in living shadow, about time that moved at different speeds for different observers. Whatever was out there in Zone 7 Charlie, it was real. It was sophisticated. And we were just beginning to understand how little we understood about it. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange routine. Diego and I would conduct surveillance flights over Zone 7 Charlie 3 to 4 nights per week, each time equipped with increasingly sophisticated monitoring equipment. We documented 17 more anomalies, each one adding to the growing database of impossible observations. Time gaps remained consistent. Whatever we experienced was always roughly half the duration that actually occurred in the recordings. Battery anomalies continued, with the drone consistently gaining 10 to 20% charge during encounters. And we saw the geometric shadow patterns 4 more times, each occurrence becoming more complex and elaborate. Dr. Reeves's team was building a profile of the phenomena based on our data. They determined that incidents were more likely during certain lunar phases, specifically during new moons when ambient light was minimal. They'd also found that incidents clustered between midnight and 0400 hours, with peak activity around 0200 hours. But the most significant discovery came from analyzing the geometric patterns. Dr. Reeves had brought in a mathematician who specialized in fractal geometry, and he'd identified something stunning. The patterns weren't random. They were mathematical progressions, each one building on the previous pattern in a sequence that suggested deliberate communication or perhaps information encoding. "Look at this," Dr. Reeves said during one of our weekly briefings, showing us a series of screenshots from different incidents. Pattern 1 from November 28th, Pattern 2 from December 3rd, Pattern 3 from December 10th. Each one incorporates elements of the previous pattern, but adds new complexity. It's like watching someone teach a mathematical lesson, building concepts step by step. "What's it trying to communicate?" I asked. "We don't know. The patterns use base 6 mathematics, which is unusual. Human mathematics typically uses base 10. The choice of base 6 might be significant. It could indicate something about how the intelligence behind this thinks, or it could be chosen specifically because it's different from our typical mathematical framework." Diego had been studying the patterns himself, spending his downtime between flights analyzing the images. What if it's not trying to communicate with us? What if we're just seeing the side effects of whatever it's actually doing? "Explain," Colonel Price said. "Well, if you're using technology that manipulates space-time or whatever physics lets you create absolute zero spheres in open air, maybe these patterns are just exhaust. Like if someone from the 1800s saw engine exhaust from a car, they might think the smoke patterns were deliberate communication, but really they're just a byproduct of combustion." Dr. Reeves nodded thoughtfully. "That's actually a reasonable hypothesis. We might be interpreting operational byproducts as intentional signals. But that didn't feel right to me. The patterns were too precise, too deliberately placed. And there was something about the timing, the way phenomena always occurred when we were actively observing with drones. Like whatever this was, it was aware of our presence and chose to manifest when we were watching. On December 18th, 3 weeks after my first encounter, something changed. We were conducting our standard survey pattern when the EMF meters spiked to the highest levels we'd recorded. 7 times baseline, far beyond any previous incident. The temperature drop was immediate and severe, going from 47 degrees to 19 degrees in less than 30 seconds. Dr. Reeves, we have major precursor indicators, I reported. EMF at 7 times baseline, temperature drop of 28 degrees. This is bigger than anything we've seen. Copy that. Are you seeing visual manifestations? Not yet. Stand by. I kept the drone steady, all cameras recording, all instruments logging data. And then I saw it on thermal. Not one sphere, but three separate zones of absolute zero temperature, arranged in a triangular formation, each one about 30 feet in diameter. Multiple thermal anomalies, I reported. 3 spheres in triangle formation, separation approximately 200 feet between them. Diego, what's your visual? I see them, not as spheres, but as dark columns, like pillars of shadow standing on the ground extending upward. Maybe 100 feet tall. And Riley, there are more geometric patterns on the ground, but these are different. More complex, they're moving. I switched to the downward camera and enhanced the image. The geometric patterns were indeed moving, not static like previous incidents. Lines and shapes were flowing across the desert floor like living things, connecting the 3 dark columns in an ever-changing web of shadow mathematics. The drone's instruments were going haywire. GPS signal dropped to 0. No satellites visible at all. The compass was spinning continuously. Altitude reading fluctuated between 380 and 420 feet, even though I was holding steady input. And the battery percentage was jumping between 67% and 91% in random sequence. We're getting serious instrument degradation, I reported. GPS is gone, compass unusable, altimeter unreliable. Can you maintain visual control? Dr. Reeves asked. Affirmative, but I'm flying on visual reference only. I've lost all navigation aids. That's when the drone's shadow separated again. But this time, instead of drifting away slowly like in previous incidents, it moved with purpose. I watched on my monitor as the shadow, clearly visible on the moonlit desert, traveled from below the drone's actual position toward the 3 dark columns, moving at maybe 20 miles per hour. The shadow is moving toward the columns, Diego reported. It's like it's being pulled toward them. As I watched, the shadow reached the nearest column and merged with it, disappearing into the darkness. And at the same moment, the visual feed cut to black. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The feed came back at 6 seconds. I immediately checked the timestamp. The gap in recording would show 12 seconds, I was certain. Whatever was happening, it was escalating, doubling the time displacement with each major incident. Diego, how long was I dark? 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Different time perceptions again, but now with a bigger discrepancy. I'd counted 6 seconds. Diego had seen 3 or 4, and the recording would show 12. Time was becoming increasingly unstable during these encounters. The 3 columns on the ground began to move, gliding across the desert in perfect triangular formation. The geometric patterns flowed between them, maintaining the connections as they traveled. And as they moved, I noticed something on the thermal camera that made my breath catch. Inside each column, there was structure. Not the featureless absolute zero that I'd seen before, but patterns within the cold, shapes that looked almost mechanical, like seeing the internal workings of some impossible machine rendered in gradients of impossible temperature. Dr. Reeves, I'm seeing internal structure in the thermal anomalies. They're not uniform. There are patterns inside them, almost like components or systems. We're seeing it on our monitors. Can you get closer for better imaging? I hesitated. Every incident report had emphasized maintaining distance, But this was unprecedented, visible internal structure and phenomena that had previously appeared featureless. This could be the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. "Moving in," I said. "Closing distance to 200 feet. As the drone approached, the columns stopped moving. They held position, arranged in their perfect triangle, the geometric patterns on the ground stabilizing into a complex, stationary design, like they were waiting. "Riley, I don't think you should get any closer," Diego said. "This feels wrong, like they're aware of you." He was right. The timing was too perfect, the response too immediate. These columns had been moving, and they'd stopped exactly when I'd decided to approach. That wasn't random. That was reactive. But Dr. Reeves's voice came over the channel. "Riley, this is a critical opportunity. We need that close-range data. Continue approach." I pushed the drone forward. 175 feet. 150 feet. At 125 feet, the internal structure became clearly visible on thermal. I could see geometric shapes arranged in layers, rotating independently like the gears of some cosmic mechanism. And in the center of each column, there was something that looked almost like a core, a region of even more impossible cold, reading temperatures that my instruments couldn't properly register. "Data received," Dr. Reeves said. "This is extraordinary. Continue approach to 100 feet if..." The EMF meter spiked to 10 times baseline. The visual feed didn't cut to black this time. Instead, it distorted, showing the desert floor fragmenting like broken glass, each fragment showing a slightly different view, a slightly different angle, like I was seeing multiple realities at once, layered over each other. "I'm getting severe visual distortion," I reported. "Multiple overlapping images, all showing..." The 3 columns collapsed inward, each one shrinking to a single point in less than a second. And then those 3 points expanded simultaneously, not as columns but as spheres, growing rapidly outward. "They're expanding!" Diego shouted. "Riley, get out of there!" But it was too late. The expansion reached the drone's position in less than 2 seconds. The visual feed went white, not black like the previous blackouts, but completely white, like every pixel was receiving maximum light input. The telemetry went dead. Every instrument showed 0 or null values. According to my control tablet, the drone no longer existed. I sat there staring at the white screen, feeling that sick twist in my stomach that comes when you know you've just lost expensive equipment and possibly your job. But more than that, I felt something else, a creeping sense that something profound and terrible had just occurred. "Diego, do you have visual on the drone?" His voice came back strained. "Negative. I can't see it. The columns expanded into spheres like you said, and they're huge now, maybe 100 feet in diameter each. They've merged into a single mass. Your drone is inside that mass somewhere, but I can't see it. Dr. Reeves, I've lost all contact with the bird. All telemetry shows null. Either the drone is destroyed, or I'm completely cut off from its systems. We're reading the same thing on our end. Stand by. We're analyzing what happened." I stared at the white screen, willing it to show something, anything. The drone had cost $40,000. Losing it to a malfunction was one thing, but losing it to unexplained phenomena while under direction from command, that was going to generate a mountain of paperwork. Then the white began to fade, not to black, but to the normal visual feed, the desert floor, the moonlight, the rocks and sparse vegetation, like someone slowly turning up a dimmer switch until the image reached normal exposure. And all my instruments came back online simultaneously. Altitude reading, 398 feet. GPS signal, 9 satellites acquired. Compass heading, locked on true north. Battery 100%, 100%. The battery had been at around 67% when I'd lost contact. Now it showed fully charged, which was impossible. Batteries don't charge while in use, and they definitely don't charge while disconnected from all power sources. Contact reestablished, I reported. All systems nominal. Battery showing 100%. How long was I offline from your perspective, Diego? Maybe 10 seconds, 15 at most. The spheres merged, stayed combined for what felt like a few seconds, then separated back into 3 columns and dissolved. Your drone just appeared again, hovering right where it had been before. I checked the timestamp. According to the recording, 32 seconds had passed. 32 seconds of white screen, of null telemetry, of the drone essentially ceasing to exist from an observational standpoint. But I'd perceived maybe 45 seconds. Diego had seen 10 to 15, and the actual recording showed 32. 3 different durations for the same event, each one impossible to reconcile with the others. Dr. Reeves, what just happened to my drone? There was a long pause before she responded. We don't know. The telemetry we received suggests the drone experienced a complete system shutdown, but obviously it's functioning normally now. The battery reading is particularly anomalous. Anomalous is an understatement. The battery is fully charged. That doesn't happen without an external power source, and we sure as hell didn't plug it into anything while it was inside that sphere. We'll need to examine the drone immediately upon landing. Don't power it down. Fly it directly back and land it at the main facility. We'll have a team waiting. I initiated the return flight, keeping careful watch on all instruments. The drone behaved normally during the return, all systems responding correctly to inputs. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The drone looked the same on my monitors, flew the same according to telemetry, but it had spent 32 seconds inside something that could create absolute zero temperatures and manipulate time itself. What had happened to it during those missing seconds? What had those spheres done? The drone landed at the main facility at 0237 hours. Dr. Reeves's technical team was waiting with equipment I'd never seen before. Scanners, meters, analysis tools that looked more like something from a research lab than a military base. They immediately began examining the drone while it was still powered on, taking readings and photographs from every angle. Battery really is at 100%, one of the technicians confirmed. And according to the battery management system logs, it never discharged below 67%. It's like the battery was replaced with a fully charged unit while the drone was inside the phenomenon. Another technician was examining the drone's exterior with what looked like a Geiger counter. I'm getting residual electromagnetic signatures. Pattern is consistent with exposure to extremely high field strength, but there's no damage to the electronics. Whatever field this was, it was intense but precisely controlled. Dr. Reeves had pulled up the flight logs on her laptop, scrolling through the data with a deepening frown. This is impossible. According to the logs, the drone never stopped recording. There are continuous entries for the entire time it was inside the sphere. But the entries show, I don't know how to describe this. It's like the drone was recording something, but the data is encoded in a format we don't recognize. She showed me the screen. Instead of the normal log entries, timestamps, GPS coordinates, system status, there were strings of characters that looked almost mathematical but didn't follow any programming language or notation system I'd ever seen. It looks like base 6 mathematics, I said, remembering the geometric patterns. Like what we've been seeing in the shadow patterns on the ground. You're right. This is a base 6 numerical sequence, but it's not just random numbers. There's structure to it. Pattern. It's data, but we don't have the key to decode it. Colonel Price had arrived during the examination, and he'd been studying the decoded data with increasing intensity. "Dr. Reeves, I need you to isolate this drone from our network immediately. Pull it offline. Disconnect all wireless systems and quarantine it in the secure lab." "Sir?" "That data didn't come from our programming. Something wrote information to the drone's systems while it was inside the phenomenon. We don't know what that information is or what it might do. Until we can decode and analyze it, this drone is potentially compromised." The technicians quickly disconnected the drone's wireless antennas and prepared it for transport to the secure laboratory. As they wheeled it away, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December night air. Something had interfaced with the drone's systems. Something had written data in an alien mathematical language directly into the flight computer. This was no longer just observation. This was contact. Direct, unmistakable contact with something that could manipulate our technology on a fundamental level. Diego and I spent the next 4 hours in debriefing, going over every detail of the encounter. Colonel Price brought in additional personnel, people whose credentials I didn't catch, but who asked very specific questions about the sphere's behavior and the drone's response. Finally, around 0700 hours, they released us with instructions not to discuss the incident with anyone and to report back the following evening for additional briefings. As Diego and I walked to our vehicles in the cold dawn light, he said quietly, "That thing rewrote the drone's code. That's what happened, isn't it? Whatever those spheres are, they didn't just observe the drone, they programmed it. That's what it looks like. What do you think the data says? What did they write into the system? I don't know. Maybe instructions. Maybe information. Maybe just a signature, like leaving a calling card to prove they can access our technology whenever they want." That's a terrifying thought. He was right. The idea that something could reach into our most sophisticated equipment and rewrite it at will, leaving messages in mathematical languages we didn't understand, that changed everything. This wasn't just an observational phenomenon. This was active engagement with our technology, possibly with us. 3 days later, Dr. Reeves called me for an urgent meeting. She looked like she hadn't slept, which didn't surprise me. Decoding alien mathematics probably wasn't conducive to rest. "We broke part of the code," she said without preamble. The data string contained several distinct segments. The first segment was relatively simple, a mathematical proof showing an understanding of quantum mechanics beyond our current capabilities. It's elegant, sophisticated, and completely correct according to our best physicists. What's the second segment? The second segment is coordinates. 3 sets of precise GPS coordinates, all within in Zone 7's Charlie. Each coordinate is paired with a timestamp, dates and times in the future. She showed me the list. Location 1, 32.8517 degree N, 113.9920 dig W. December 24th, 0217 hours. Location 2, 32.8409 dig N, 113.189 degree W. December 31st, 0008 hours. Location 3, 32.8556 degree N, 113.1945 degree. January 7th, 0134 hours. What do these mean? What's happening at those locations and times? We don't know. They could be predictions, events that will occur naturally. They could be invitations, requests for us to be at those locations at those times. Or they could be warnings, places and times we should avoid. We have no context to interpret the intention. Are we going to observe them? Colonel Price is deciding that now. If we send drones to those locations at those times, we'll be responding to direct communication from the phenomena. that's a significant step. It means acknowledging that this is intelligent contact and engaging with it on its terms. I thought about those spheres of absolute cold, about geometric shadows that moved on their own, about time that flowed differently for different observers. Whatever this intelligence was, it operated on principles we barely understood. Engaging with it could be dangerous. But ignoring coordinates and timestamps that something had deliberately placed in our drone's memory, that seemed even more dangerous. Like refusing to answer a message from something powerful enough to rewrite reality at will. "I want to be there," I said. "December 24th. If we're sending a drone to those coordinates, I want to be the operator." Dr. Reeves studied me for a long moment. "You understand the risk. Whatever happens at those coordinates, it could be significantly more intense than what we've experienced so far. This could be escalation. I understand, but I've been documenting these phenomena from the beginning. If we're moving into a new phase, into direct response to their communication, I should be part of it." She nodded slowly. "I'll recommend you to Colonel Price. But Riley, you should know, the third segment of decoded data is concerning. It's another mathematical sequence, but this one describes something we recognize: quantum entanglement at a macro scale. The kind of entanglement that would allow instantaneous communication across vast distances, or matter transfer, or other capabilities that our physics says are theoretically possible but practically impossible with current technology. Why is that concerning? Because if they're demonstrating knowledge of macro-scale quantum entanglement, it suggests they have the capability to act on it. Which means whatever happens at those coordinates might not stay at those coordinates. The effects could be non-local, spread across distance in ways we can't predict or control." She was saying that engaging with this intelligence could have consequences beyond what we could observe or measure. That we might be opening a door that couldn't be closed, but the door was already open. Something was out there in Zone 7 Charlie, creating impossible physics and leaving mathematical messages in our technology. We could either try to understand it, or we could watch helplessly while it continued to operate with increasing boldness. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "When do we deploy for the first coordinates?" I asked. "December 24th, 0200 hours. We'll have a full observation team in place, multiple drones, ground personnel, remote monitoring. Whatever happens, we'll document it completely." 5 days later, on Christmas Eve, I stood at my field post position in the freezing desert night, preparing to fly my drone to coordinates that something non-human had specifically designated. The temperature was 34 degrees, cold for Arizona, and the sky was crystal clear. Diego was on the ground again, along with 6 other spotters positioned around the target coordinates. Dr. Reeves was at the main facility with a full analysis team monitoring our feeds in real time. Colonel Price was present, along with people whose credentials I still didn't know and probably wasn't cleared to hear. This was it, first contact with something that had been observing us, leaving patterns, rewriting our technology. In 15 minutes, we'd find out what they wanted to show us. "All teams report ready status." Colonel Price's voice came over the radio. One by one, the teams checked in. Everyone was in position, all equipment operational, all recording systems active. "Riley, you're cleared for launch at 2215 hours, Colonel Price said. "Fly to the designated coordinates and hold at 400 feet. Observe and document. If at any point you feel the situation is unsafe, you have authority to abort." "Understood, sir." At exactly 0215 hours, I launched the drone. It climbed smoothly into the cold night air, its navigation lights visible against the stars. I flew directly to the coordinates that had been written in alien mathematics into my previous drone's memory. 32.851 degree N 113.9923 degree W. The exact center of Zone 7, Charlie, the focal point where every previous incident had occurred. The drone arrived on station at 026634, 1 minute ahead of the scheduled time. All instruments showed normal readings. No EMF spikes, no temperature anomalies, no precursor indicators. Just empty desert and cold night air. We waited. At exactly 0217 Qua, the desert floor directly below the drone erupted with light. Not the darkness we'd seen before, but light. Brilliant white light shining upward from the ground, as if the earth itself had become luminous. The geometric patterns appeared instantly, not forming gradually, but snapping into existence fully formed. But these patterns were enormous, covering hundreds of feet of desert floor, and they were moving with purpose and coordination. 3 spheres rose from the light, ascending through it like submarines surfacing from an ocean. But these weren't the spheres of absolute cold we'd seen before. These glowed with that same brilliant white light, and they weren't cold at all. They registered on thermal as sources of intense heat, hundreds of degrees above ambient temperature. "We have manifestation," I reported, my voice steadier than I felt. 3 spheres, luminous, rising from ground-level light source, heat signatures extreme. The spheres arranged themselves in the familiar triangular formation, but this time they weren't hovering. They were spinning, rotating around their centers with visible motion. And as they spun, they began to emit something, pulses of light that traveled outward in expanding rings like ripples on a pond. Each pulse that passed through the drone created another time gap. I could feel them now, brief moments of discontinuity where everything jumped forward. 1 second I was watching the spheres, the next second they'd moved to a different position, with no memory of the transition. "Experiencing multiple time anomalies," I reported. "Discontinuous perception." Diego's voice came over the radio, strained. "Riley, you need to see this. I'm sending photos." My phone buzzed with incoming images. I glanced at them and felt my blood run cold. The photos showed the desert floor, lit by that brilliant white light. But there were shadows on that lit surface. Human-shaped shadows. Dozens of them, standing in precise geometric patterns around the 3 spinning spheres. But there were no people casting those shadows. Just the shadows themselves. Dark human silhouettes standing on luminous ground. "Are you seeing people down there?" I asked. "No, just shadows." "But Riley, they're moving. The shadows are walking around, changing positions." I'm watching shadows with no bodies move independently across the lit ground. I looked at the visual camera feed, zooming to maximum magnification. Diego was right. The shadows were moving with purpose, walking in patterns around the spheres, occasionally stopping, and it looked like they were interacting with each other, like watching silhouettes of people conducting some kind of meeting or ritual, except there were no actual people present. The spheres suddenly stopped spinning. The pulses of light ceased, and for one perfect moment, everything was absolutely still. The spheres, the shadows, the geometric patterns on the ground. Then all 3 spheres contracted to points and vanished, and the light from the ground cut out instantly, plunging the desert back into darkness. The shadows disappeared with the light, and the drone's battery showed 100% charge. I landed the drone and immediately pulled the flight logs. The data showed 93 seconds of missing time. Moments when the drone had been present but not recording, or recording in that alien Base 6 mathematics that we still didn't fully understand. Dr. Reeves called on the secure channel. "We need you at the lab immediately. All teams, secure your equipment and report to main facility. We're analyzing what just occurred, and we need all available data immediately. As I drove to the facility in the pre-dawn darkness, I couldn't stop thinking about those moving shadows. Human shapes with no humans, walking and gathering around impossibly bright spheres in patterns we didn't comprehend. Whatever intelligence we'd made contact with, it wasn't just observing our technology anymore. It was showing us something, demonstrating capabilities, displaying what it could do. The spheres, the time manipulation, the shadows without bodies. This was a message, a demonstration of power, or an invitation, or maybe a warning. And we had 2 more coordinates to visit. 2 more times when this intelligence had told us exactly where and when it would appear next. Whatever was happening in Zone 7 Charlie, it was building towards something. Something that made impossible spheres and shadow people look like preliminary demonstrations. I had a feeling we were about to find out what that something was.